O'Reilly. Are your wiper blades chattering, skipping, or squeaking? Don't let streaks or smearing on your windshield compromise your visibility. When it's time to replace your wiper blades, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts and see our selection. Our professional parts people will even install your new wiper blades while you wait. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today. O'Reilly Auto Parts.
There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.
I guess I grew up on an older road.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 126 of the Hunting Collective. I'm Ben O'Brien, and we are back, Phil, back in the studio.
That's right. We made it happen. It was last minute.
It was last minute, but you're holding a special little microphone.
Well, we took a couple mics out of the studio. One's at my house, and the other is at your house.
Oh.
And so I had to improvise. This is my own personal mic.
Good. I thought maybe it might have been a sanitary reason why you have your own personal mic. You don't like to share mics in this time of Corona. No, nothing. All right, Joe Farinato. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, I'm ready to get into what we're going to talk about. We also have Sam Lundgren. Hello, Samuel.
Howdy.
You guys ready?
I was born ready.
Always ready.
Joe, you ready? It seems that Phil is not ready.
I'm not.
To talk about what we're going to talk about.
I'm sure he's not.
Yeah, what we're going to talk about revolves a lot around images and video. I mean, it really is the kind of the impetus for the story. And don't look at it, Phil. Phil's trying to sneak a peek.
I already saw it. Cheating.
Oh, you didn't
know.
know.
You didn't see it.
Really
you didn't see anything, Phil.
Okay, so where to begin here? It's going to be it's kind of a long and convoluted, twisting, turning tale that we're going to try to tell you, and we'll try to explain its importance before we get into it. But before that, Phil, can you look at this image? Look right at that. See that fella?
Yep, I see it.
Yep, you see it. His name is Glenn Bond.
That's a human? That's a human being?
It's a real man.
Okay.
His name is Glenn Bond. What you're looking at there, Phil, is the direct aftermath of a grizzly bear attack on the Denali Highway in 2016. Glenn was attacked by, I think, a 9-foot grizzly bear, which is, Joe, you can confirm, a big bastard.
It's big
bastard. We're gonna. This isn't what you're about to hear. Is not just the story of a grizzly bear attack. We've done that before here multiple times. We'll continue to do that because they're life or death struggles. But we also we love to love them. We absolutely, as a culture, are infatuated with bear attacks, the violence of them, the predatory nature sometimes of them. They're also, like I said, some of the most compelling stories we can present as a show. But this one, Sam, has more layers to it, does it not?
It has a lot more layers to it, Ben. A couple weeks ago when you first reached out to me about this and I started looking into it, I wound up diving into the depths of the internet for about 7 hours straight until about 1 a.m. It's shockingly complex, and I still don't know what I think about it.
Yeah,
to be completely honest.
Yeah, we've been working on this for, like you said, for about 2 weeks. we've been doing the best investigative journalism as we can to try to bring this full story. And it's not just because there was a bear attack. There are other elements to this story that go to, as I already mentioned, our infatuation with bear attacks and how the internet, social media, message boards, clickbaity websites treat a story that has sensationalist tendencies like this one we're about to tell. That's a big important part of this. Another important part of this is like, what is the truth? Why? What do we believe online? What do we find to be credible? And how do those things get told? But then maybe the most important here is one family's strange ride over the past 6 years, roughly. There's a lot of layers to the Bond family story, and there's some characters in here that we'll go through. This may take a while because there's a lot to it. So are you ready to kind of? You don't know anything about this, right? You know much about this?
Not really. No. I mean, I've heard some of the interview with Bret.
Well, good. And so all we're gonna need from you, Phil, is just to react, make any kind of noise you feel like, or anything like that you need to do. Okay.
Good gracious.
Make them funny.
I should have brought in the Giannis soundboard. Giannis reacting.
So this will be a little bit different podcast. I have a pile of emails, very interesting emails, probably 50 emails I'd love to read on this show. But we're gonna stick to this story right now. Next week we'll talk to you about the THC book club. We'll get some reactions to, I'm sure, this story and to Shane Mahoney last week and some other things that people have been asking. But for now, we got plenty to do to get to telling this story. Bret Bond, a 33-year-old hunting guide out of Wasilla, Alaska, is our guest today. We're going to hear him coming up in a little bit once we kind of set the stage. The stage is gigantic, so it's going to take us a while to set it up for you. But Bret Bond is the man kind of at the middle of all of this. And we've already mentioned his father, 77-year-old hunting guide, retired hunting guide, Glenn Bond. And where this all kind of starts, like many modern bear attack stories seem to, this starts on social media in multiple ways. So we're gonna have to jump back and forth through time with this. So we're gonna start on March 20th, 2020. Now, many of you listening may have seen the images that I'm going to try to describe to you. I'm going to let these other guys try to also describe the images to you. You may have seen them. They got shared. I don't know how many times they got shared to me. Probably 50, right when they first were posted on March 20th. And then our Meat Eater inbox, Joe, I know you run that. I'm sure that was flooded with links to this story.
Yep. Shared a lot.
So it was shared around. I think everybody in the office at the time sent this to me. My first initial reaction was fake. Sam, similar?
I think so, but then I looked closely at it and just wondered how or why it could be fake, but that was certainly my initial reaction.
Because to preface all this, why you would think something like this is fake, and we'll tell you what we're try to describe what we're talking about. We'll certainly have a place for you to go and see these images, of course, my social media and on the Meat Eaters as well once we get into this. But why they're fake, or why they could have been fake in my mind, we had a story about out of Russia in 2019. It would have been, last fall? Sam, you remember this story?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this story comes out that a man had been cached in a bear den for over a month by a grizzly bear, or a Russian brown bear, I believe it was, in fact. And there was video of him sitting up through this, he was skinny as could possibly be. He looked like the crypt keeper. He was near death, and there was this video of him kind of sitting up and moving and opening his eyes. It looked like a corpse, but what you would see is that he was actually alive. And many sources at the time, many major news sources from Britain and here in the States were saying this, were reporting this as a real story, and then using local news sources from Russia as a way to buttress stories they were telling. Turns out, Sam, it was fake, right?
It was, yeah, and you can look back on Spencer Neuhart's reporting on that. He did a good job, actually a heck of a lot better than many of those tabloid news sources you mentioned. But I mean, there's a lot of inconsistencies with the story, and I think maybe a traditional these tabloid news sources may not care a lot because, they kind of deal in salacious content all the time. But anyone with the slightest inkling about bear ecology and behavior saw a lot of issues with that story right away. First and foremost being that bears don't really cache meals that often, certainly not things that are alive.
No.
And certainly not for a length of a month inside their own den. So it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that it was concocted. I don't know if we ever did find out where that video came from, because that was certainly an emaciated man who was very near death.
Yeah. So there's, in terms of like what a hoax would be online and why this story sets up like this, the images are shocking. They don't seem real. They don't seem like they could be real, nor does the video of Glenn Bond that we'll describe here in a second. They don't seem real. So my experience is, that the video of the man supposedly in the bear den that's survived the bear den didn't seem real, but the video was compelling enough to make me look more than once at it, and it shocked me into wanting to read more about it. And that's kind of, in essence, what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with some very gruesome, salacious videos and imagery that would drive a lot of people's interest, right? Interest online drives clicks. Clicks is engagement. Engagement means money. All of those things are involved in the story as well. From this March 20th post on Instagram that I would just describe to the origin of some of the things we'll talk about, where this becomes, in my mind, an urban legend up to the point where we're trying to tell you the real story on today's podcast and also an article we're working on. But to start, just kind of start at the end here a little bit. Bret Bond has an Instagram account at BBBAlaskan. I was first introduced to it by Sam Soholt, who sent me a link to it, as many other folks did at the time, saying, "What the fuck? Look at this." I flipped through the images. I think, I can't look at that. I couldn't even look at them. I couldn't get through them, much like Phil right now. Can't quite seem to take a long, hard look. I hadn't watched the video until last week, because I had plenty of opportunities to. I just couldn't. It's that gruesome. I'm
kind of surprised that Phil was able to hang on to his birthday cake lunch while viewing.
Thanks for ratting me out.
Yeah. Sam, jeez. We were talking about, are we working out during the quarantine?
You can't give me that and not expect it to come back up. Sorry.
Yeah. We were talking about, are we working out during the quarantine? And Phil said he's doing the opposite. Sam asked, well, what could be the opposite of working out? Phil explained pizza and cake for lunch. Yeah, is the opposite of working out.
And that satisfied my question.
Yeah, and he was very like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Nice. It was left over from a birthday party. I'm not letting anything go to waste. That's
right.
all.
Waste not, want not.
That's right.
Yep, your body is a recycling plant.
Sustainability.
That's
important.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how to transition out of that, but I'm going to do it. We're writing an article for the MeatEater.com. Right now we have about 3,500 words. It's probably going to end up being about 5,000 words. And for those that don't count words in articles, that's fucking long. It's real long. So I would just give you kind of the breakdown. When Bond posted these images on March 20th, he posted 7 images of various types, but there's a few important images. The lead image, which is very important, was a man, his father Glenn, sitting on a snowmobile with a giant boar grizzly bear kind of laying in the snow beside the snow machine, and his father he had what looked like a puffy jacket and pants on, the hood pulled up around, and you can just kind of see that his face is different shades of red. You can't really tell. It's a very intriguing image in itself. You just want to zoom into it immediately. You can't really tell what's going on in his face, but you can tell it's probably not great because it's just literally like a sheet of red.
And it's poor quality image. It's very pixelated, and so looking at that one, you certainly could see how people's flags would go up. Yeah, in this day and age of, we're very well trained now to question things we see on the internet and just in general. So I can see how some people responded to that and
for sure
wondered how it could possibly be true.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to say the same thing, because looking at that one, I definitely felt like, oh, this could possibly be fake.
For sure, for sure. And again, it's a healthy skepticism. at play here. We had it, the three of us had it, investigating it up until we had like triple confirmation that it was real. This is after the recording you're going to hear with Bret Bond, where I interviewed Bret. This is a week after that, until I finally decided this dude's telling the truth. I told him while we interviewed him, I said, we've got to go find the truth for your sake and for the sake of our show. We got to go and do our best Big J journalism here and find out the truth about this, because it became a lot more than just these images. But the first image we described there, the second image is the one that gets a little messy. It's a photo of Glenn Bond kind of laid down in the snow shortly after the bear attack. His flesh and skin are peeled away from his skull. Best I can describe it, you can kind of see you can't see any definition of his nose. His mouth is gone. His lips are gone. You can see through like shards of flesh that his teeth are there. He has one eyeball protruding out of a fairly bloody mess of flesh and ligaments and things that are there. His scalp is laid back in a particularly gruesome way.
And I think to add more context here, we may have used the kind of the shorthand that his face was quote unquote ripped off, and I don't think that'd be necessarily accurate. No. If you're trying to picture this, it's almost as if a very large grizzly paw. You imagine it on your face, starting at the forehead and going straight down the nose, and basically parting the face and flaying it out towards both sides. So it's not necessarily off; it's clearly still there, but not where it is usually located.
Peeled back and hanging.
Yes.
It's gruesome.
It's gruesome. It's gruesome. It really does kind of look like a special effects image that you might see out of Hollywood. When you're watching a show like Game of Thrones, or you're watching, even The Revenant, like it looks like something that may have been constructed on a movie set. But we can assure you, we've done the work. We know as much as anybody that wasn't actually there with the two of these guys is true. That is Glenn Bond, and his face was, forever changed by a grizzly bear. And so those are the first two images, and the reason why they're important is because we already talked about
I think it's
those.
important to put in, or to add context in those images. He's still conscious and propped up, like by his own power.
Yeah,
he's up on his elbow. Yeah, sitting there.
Yeah, we're going to try to dance around the actual story because Bret tells it well, and I don't want to tell it for Bret, but that's a big part of this. And as we go through this, there's a lot of points of reflection where this guy could have died given a millimeter or centimeter in one direction, or given a snow machine running out of gas or the engine braking, given a pilot of a plane taking this direction or that direction, given a surgeon doing this or that. With his medical care afterwards. There's a million things that could have happened that would have either caused the loss of Glenn Bond's life or would have not allowed him to recover in the way that we'll explain that he did. And so I think one of the interesting parts of this story is exactly that this man lived. He's a tough man. Maybe the toughest you'll ever run into given this scenario. But he is essentially, as you'll hear Bret report in the interview, up and talking, and worried. Bret talks about in the interview when he reaches his father after he finally gets to him after the attack is over. His father is worried about his wrist. His wrist hurts, and he obviously couldn't see his own face. I'm sure he could feel. Glenn Bond has never spoken publicly. That's one thing we can start by saying. You won't hear from Glenn in this podcast or anywhere else that we report on this story. But I imagine if you asked him to describe what it felt like, it would be quite the interesting response.
Well, and you've got to imagine that he was I'm certain that he was in shock.
Yeah.
So, people respond strangely, especially when there's that much adrenaline going. So it's hard to know.
Yeah. So this post happens. There's other images there. We'll get to a couple of them here in a little bit. But this post happens. It kind of sets off a bit of a viral thing. Bret has at BBB Alaskan, he's got like a couple hundred followers, 800 followers or so at the time that he posts. By the time this is all over, this thing has gone viral. He's got 20,000 more followers. The post has been liked over 140,000 times. It's been shared all over the internet. It becomes the most talked about bear attack, certainly of quarantine. It certainly has so many elements to it that it might be the most talked about bear attack in some time that I've seen, for many reasons. But that's kind of what happened in March that kind of triggered us to be looking into this. I sent Bret a message and said, Bret, boy, I'd love to hear about this. I would love for you to come on the show and tell his story. Have you told it anywhere else? What the hell is going on? Ask him all these questions. He just came back with, what's a podcast? Never heard one. So I sent him a couple of our podcasts. I said, here's what we do. I feel like we could tell that you should tell the story because, man, a lot of people are talking about this. I'm only messaging you because I've, 50, 60, 70 fans of my show, have listeners of my show have reached out about this. So I think we should tell this story. It took me, to Bret's credit, about 10 days to convince him, for lack of a better term, to come and tell a story. He wanted to listen to some more podcasts, wanted to think about it, wanted to gauge the reaction a little bit more. Well, I finally reached out and we chatted, and he said he would come on and tell a story. Now, at this moment, I thought just another bear attack podcast in my mind, that this would just be him telling his story. It would be amazing, and we would share the images and we would go on to the next podcast. What I didn't know is what the hell was actually going on with the bear attack itself, but then also kind of all the things that orbited around the Bond family, Glenn, Bret, Bret's mother, Lorraine Phillips, who we'll tell you about here in a minute. Let's just say, like, when this all happened, when I first called you, Sam, what did you think about this? I mean, I told you, I said, I think this is a crazy story that we're going to need to suss out.
Yeah, I didn't see it at first. I was like, well, it's another bear attack. Our audience, our community loves bear attacks. So yeah, that's great. But then, the numerous allegations of the images being fake certainly caught my interest because, why would people be putting those out and also, publicly commenting on the bear attack. So, and then we also started to find the images being ascribed to other bear attacks, and that certainly cast more doubt on their veracity. Oh man! And then as soon as you Google into some of this, there's just a lot of webs and rabbit holes to take you down. And like I said, I kind of dismissed it a little bit at first, like, oh yeah, heck yeah, I'll help you with that. If I take your word for it because I have a lot of trust in you as a reporter. And I'm like, if he says this is a story, then great. And I was pretty busy at the time, but once I really had an opportunity to dive into it, I absolutely saw what you meant.
Yeah, Joe. Because I felt like when a lot of times you run a story like this, you can just write it. You just write it, and that's it. You have interview a couple people. We call it in our business, we call it as told to. It's an as told to story. Somebody tells you a story, you write what they said, and you kind of blend it all together with your own words, reporting their statements. This started out as a nice as told to story. I even talked to Bret about that, explain what an as told to is, and explain that that's what I intended to do with take the podcast and turn it into an article, just to kind of buttress the offering, to make sure we tell the story. But at some point, really early on, and that's what I think when I called Sam and then talked to you, Joe, I'm like, this is gonna be. How can I prove this is true? One, I want to prove this is true for Bret's sake, because I like I said, I was skeptical, but then eventually I came to believe him. After I talked to him on this podcast, I came to believe what he was saying. So how am I going to prove this is true if I don't look at this part, this part, this part, this part, and this part? And then when we did, I'm like, oh shit, now I got to go down this rabbit hole, and this one. And every time we went down one, we discovered some other kind of odd or amazing fact or statement from someone involved in this. And then it becomes what it is now. We're titling the article is Bear Attack Turned Urban Legend, the true story behind the gruesome images that shocked the internet. I think that's, maybe clicky, ironically, but that's really what's going on here.
Yeah.
When we pick up this story on March 20th of this year, we are 4 years into it. Once something I found out pretty early from Bret. He's like, well, it happened 4 years ago. And I'm like, what?
How did we not hear about this?
I've been doing this particular thing, writing outdoor stories that I would have loved to have this 4 years ago or at any time during my career.
Yeah, both of us were embroiled in all the same stuff 4 years ago.
Yeah. And so the fact that it just, like I said, as this thing built, you find these little things out and it just feels like something more is going on and growing here. And so at that time, we're all working on this, and a couple things happened. One, Bret had told me prior to recording this that he felt like his parents were off limits. He was sharing the images, he was talking, he was telling his story. He felt, and at the time I felt rightly so that he was telling the story, and that was it. And there wasn't any need to talk to his father. His father wasn't going to talk, and there's no need to talk to his mother. So we kind of took that for what it was. But the first thing that you find, it happened 4 years ago. When you Google it, I mean, how many bear attacks have we talked about on this show and that you guys have covered? Joe, you wrote about a lot of bear attacks over this last fall for our website.
Yep.
These things happen, and then within the week, days, sometimes even hours of them happening, there are reports out there. Local media usually first, and it kind of trickles into wherever it's going to play out on a more national, regional level. There was nothing about this. Comparatively, there were some things, but I mean almost nothing about this attack.
Well, yeah, there was pretty much nothing. There was nothing focusing on it. It was only secondary information talking about when we were talking about another bear attack.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what happens and somewhat explains it away for me, is that it actually was mentioned in a variety of relatively highly regarded publications in the United States and the United Kingdom. But it kind of ended up playing second fiddle to another attack that happened in Alaska 3 days later. That was slightly somehow sexier.
Forrest Wagner, 35, was leading a group of 12 students on, some outing, and was attacked by a bear.
Professor at University of Alaska, I believe.
That's right. Attacked by a bear 3 days after Glenn Bond was attacked. I've read the story. It's pretty straightforward. He was attacked. One of the students called for medical assistance. He got medical assistance. He was mauled but lived. No need to, but there's a lot of different bear attacks we can compare to this one. That this one happened to, and Bret told me this, and I think he says this in the recording, that he felt they lucked out because that happened, right? And some of the, if you Google this bear attack, as we said, you'll find that it's, buried. There's a Guardian article talking about the Wagner attack. About halfway through, it just mentions, oh yeah, by the way, this guy, 77-year-old guy, Glenn Bond, was also attacked in close proximity, and it doesn't even really say exactly how close these two attacks are.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about a publication like The Guardian, you think about being in their newsroom that week, and some editors would slap a reporter up the side of the face. No, we're not going to do 2 articles about people getting attacked by bears in Alaska. Now it's a trend. Now this happened, and we're going to talk about both of them collated, and it just so happened that they were close in time, but Forrest Wagner had 12 people watching this, and it was a professor at a university, and he talked about it. Yep. But Glenn and Bret Bond did not talk about it, and refused interview requests, and it just kind of faded away.
Yeah, fizzled away.
Yeah.
And when you said that to me, Ben, that Bret thought that they lucked out with the other attack to kind of get rid of that media pressure, it put a little alarm going off in my head. I was like, well, why did he think they lucked out? What was the story behind that? Why didn't they want that attention?
Yeah, we're going to get into that too a little bit here. What the backstory on that takes us in a whole different direction. But I think that's where you start to realize that you're going to have to go a little bit deeper. You're digging deeper and deeper and deeper into this. Talking to Bret, he's telling me that when he calls the state troopers, you'll hear in his story, his dad gets attacked. His dad requests that he take some photos and video. That's where we get the gruesome things we've described. Then they have to take the 25 mile. I'm pretty sure I'm right on 25 miles.
24. I just
24?
looked at that.
Yep, 24 miles back to the lodge where they were staying. I believe Buck Creek Lodge.
Alpine Creek.
Alpine Creek Lodge.
It's on the Denali Highway.
You're thinking of Buck Valley.
Buck Valley. Yeah, the Queer Bears of Buck Valley. We'll get to that too. There's a lot of stuff to remember here. And I was up till 3 a.m. working on this last night. And so we learn that they take this journey to come back. And when he calls the state troopers, he just says exactly the least amount of detail that he can give. He doesn't even give his own name. He says Hunter, a 77-year-old hunter, was attacked by a bear and his hunting partner shot the bear off of him.
And that's pretty much all you see in any of the media reports.
You have
not even his son.
Do you have that audio pulled up there? There's one report from a local state trooper representative. And if you, Joe, maybe find the name of the person talking, we're going to hear. But it was like a radio report, and you'll hear that it's just kind of the bare bones.
Yeah, I have it here if you want
Okay,
me to
go
play
for it.
A man was attacked by a bear near the Denali Highway over the weekend. Alaska State Trooper spokesman Tim Despain says 77-year-old Glenn Bond of Wasilla was bear hunting Friday afternoon near mile 68 when he was mauled by a grizzly.
It was reported to the troopers that the injuries were fairly significant.
Despain says the attacking bear was shot dead by another hunter.
Bond was then driven to the Denali Highway by snow machine where he was flown by Life Med to Anchorage.
Despain says friends of the victim, accompanied by Alaska Department of Fish and Game and state trooper representatives, returned to the attack site Saturday and retrieved the bear carcass.
That's it.
That's it.
And if you read the stories, that's it. So you might ask, why? Why on earth would a family like this want to keep this quiet, or at least kind of only give the minimum amount of play to it in the media? There could be a lot of reasons. I asked Bret this specifically the other day because as we're working on the story, I'm like, I just need to ask him specifically, why is it that you? Because he said, I just told him it was a hunting partner. I didn't want to give names or go any deeper. And he just responded to me. I asked him, and he just responded, because I'm a private person. That was his response. There's a lot, I think, that is behind that him and I have talked about, and him and I've talked about with his mom, Lorraine Phillips, that I'm comfortable sharing here, but there is just so folks listening know, like, we're sharing these folks' stories, so we respect what they said and respect how they would like this to be treated, because it's their lives, and this is a freaking serious thing. I mean, this is a serious event that happened to Glenn Bond, and it's on the folks covering this to do it in such a way that people can get the truth. They can learn from it, might save someone's life, but they also deserve to know the real story behind something as salacious as this. So when you get to a certain point in this story, there's a void created. We're going to kind of explain how that void got created. Well, we know how the void got created. It got created because the Bonds didn't want anybody to know about this story or weren't willing to put it out there for the media. So there's a void. What's the other part of this? Well, a couple of images, the ones we've already described, plus a third image, get out online in kind of the wake of this story. They get out online. So now you have the family that's not talking about it, not telling the true story. You have a message board on the internet where 3 images, as far as I know, get laid out. 2 of them we've already described. The third one is a picture of Glenn, Bret, and a man named David Johnston posing 9 days after the attack. This is where this shit it just starts to get crazy here, if it isn't already. 9 days after the attack, there's a picture of David Johnston, the owner of Diamond D Custom Leather. It was a shop, I believe, in Anchorage. Saying that right? There's 3 of them. Bret on the right, in the center is his dad, on the left is David. Bret is showing off this leather holster that he was wearing when he shot the bear off of his father and saved his father, which we may not have mentioned at that point. This is key. So the three of them are standing there like, here you go, Phil. This is what the guy looks like 9 days after the attack. Can you believe that?
That's unreal. It's like they must have the greatest surgeons in the world.
Okay,
wherever.
now let me give you another one. All that surgery you're seeing was performed without sedatives, without anesthesia, and without blood transfusions.
Yep.
So is this kind of why you brought up earlier that like you'd rather not use the language his face was ripped off because it was still hanging there and it looks like they were able to put it back together pretty well.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. It's hard. It's semantics at some level. His face wasn't where it should have been. It was kind of off to the side, however you describe it. But this is where we start to discover the amazing recovery here in this photo. But it's kind of a dual discovery. When you look at this photo, you're looking at, oh my God, this guy, no way. Bret shared with me the timestamp of the image that was off his phone here. And I thought, no way is this 9 days. There's no possible way this is 9 days. Other bear attack stories we've looked at, millions of dollars and years of surgery to put people's faces back on.
Yeah, I talked to a doctor friend of mine too and showed him that picture. And I was like, 9 days. And he's like, no way.
Yeah.
It's like there's no bruising. Like he looks like months and months after.
Yeah, in this photo, like his eye is gone, his ear is gone. What would be, I guess, his left eye is gone.
Yeah, his left eye is gone, and his right ear is reattached, but he's missing half of it.
Missing half. He has some scarring across the center of his forehead down to the bridge of his nose. There's bruising and swelling across his face. He's got a cast on his left hand, a wrap on his right hand, wrist, forearm. And he ain't looking great, but considering the last photo we saw of him 9 days before, he's looking pretty great. So this is like, we discovered this part now. The other thing we discover, like his miraculous recovery, but we also discovered that this is kind of where this urban legend starts to grow. The void I talked about a minute ago, where there's nobody talking about or reporting on this story. We've covered that. Now into the void enters these images. So there's two parts. One part, the truth ain't there. Second part, there's crazy images floating around the internet on message boards. We may, by the time we publish our article, find out exactly where these images were first posted. Don't know that really matters. A message board, in my mind, is a message board in terms of their in-depth reporting. But
They got out.
yeah, they got out. And they got out from David Johnston. This is 9 days later. They went to Custom D Leather Shop. When the first time I got to talk to Lorraine Phillips, Bret's mom, she tells me that yes, David Johnston and possibly his daughter, who was also in the shop at the time, were a part of, we got some images from Bret at the urging of Lorraine, his mother. She said, share some images with them. That would be nice. That he shares those images, and at some point they put them on a message board. Don't know that it really matters what exact message board, but Lorraine and shop manager Mike Barrett both, to my mind, confirmed that happened. Right, Joe? Because Joe talked to Mike Barrett.
Yep. Yeah, at that time, Mike did confirm that David Johnston or his daughter, one of them, who was basically running the media for the shop at that time, put it on some message board. He wasn't aware.
Yeah, it's been 40 years.
Which spot, but
I think we can skip that part and work around it and assume that those folks are telling us the truth. So those things get out, and then somewhere along the way, this becomes a bigger thing because there's a lot of accusations, but someone takes these images and applies them to a man named Wes Perkins. Joe, you want to tell us a little bit about Wes Perkins?
Well, that's where you started this whole thing with me.
Yeah.
So you called me right when this came. You're like, Google Wes Perkins bear attack, see what comes up. And what came up was a story about a terrible bear attack where a guy got his face ripped off, and these images were attached to it. But the weird thing was, these images weren't seen by anybody until 2016. And Wes Perkins attack happened in 2012 or 2011.
2011.
Yeah, 2011. And even in your interview with Bret, in your conversations with Bret, he went back and said, yeah, people were commenting on my pictures of my dad when I posted them on Instagram saying, hey, that's Wes Perkins. And everybody was like, who saw these pictures beforehand were like, hey, that's the guy. That's Wes Perkins. And people very strongly believed that Glenn Bond was Wes Perkins.
They had 3 years to convince themselves that
Yeah.
this is Wes Perkins. There's a lot more we have to uncover in terms of the Wes Perkins part of this, but I will say what I did find is that somewhere along the way, and we're looking into this, we may never find out because it's just somebody has to admit to this, or some again, deep in some message board, someone made the connection, right? They take these salacious images that they're seeing for the first time in 2016, connect them to a bear story they've heard, possibly something they heard is very similar, and somehow something happens where these two things get connected. From there, it gets conflated to, this is Wes Perkins. My God, the Wes Perkins bear attack.
Yeah. Well, and then Wes Perkins, too, when that attack happened, there was a lot of coverage about it.
Yeah.
I mean, he had, 22 surgeries or something and millions of dollars worth of medical bills, and people knew about it. And then when somebody saw these photos, it wasn't hard to go, yeah, that's the dude who got his face ripped off. Because even in those Wes Perkins articles, he says how he's a paramedic or a nurse or something. And he said
a fire chief.
A fire chief, yeah.
He Nome.
Yeah, he had to pull like blockage out of his airways and stuff because everything was torn apart and falling down, and he was basically choking on himself. So everybody, when they saw these photos, they were like, "Yep, that has to be him."
Has to.
Yeah.
And so, but it wasn't just that it was on some message board. You're talking about, we found instances on websites like Wide Open Spaces where it's pretty clear. We don't have confirmation from Wide Open Spaces or anything, but the images have been removed from the site as they stand today. But the article that describes Wes Perkins starts with graphic on the title goes.
Yep.
And inside of the article is a picture of like a grizzly bear walking through a meadow. And so something has been removed. There's nothing graphic there. Something has been removed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm pretty comfortable saying that someone reported on this somewhere. There's a website, if you Google it, called American Shooting Journal. Joe, I got that right?
Yep, American Shooting Journal.
Where this still exists. You can go read the story about Wes Perkins with a cropped out version of the Diamond D photo.
Not only does it still exist, it was published 6 days before Bret put his photos on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like March 14th.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe it was updated. Who knows?
Or yeah, maybe it was updated, but
who knows?
The last timestamp on there is March 14th, 2020.
So this is a part of the story that just goes to prove a lot of things. You know, one thing that I thought summed this up, I was looking at a site, and there's a lot. There's the Twitter, some like debunking Twitter pages that were after this, trying to debunk the Wes Perkins story that was actually the Glenn Bond photos, as early as 2017, and then all the way up to 2019. There's multiple articles describing Wes Perkins bear attack that have the Glenn Bond images, but also there's just straight up things like I'll find it here as I scroll through this. There's things like a site called fakeologist.com that has a whole thing about grizzly bear attacks, and on it, true and not true, what's true and what's not true. And this is November 2019. One of the commenters writes, they post the Glenn Bond images, and so this is roughly 4 months before Bret Bond posts this stuff on Instagram that started this whole thing. The commenter says, the use of special effects in the case of Wes Perkins' overly brutal 2011 grizzly bear attack seems quite apparent, as the effects used in the quote-unquote crime scene imagery are too severe to believe on their own, particularly when related to the improbable narrative. Let that sink in for a minute. This dude is like, what's improbable, this narrative in these photos? You're like, yep. They come to find out you're right. Conspiracy theorist blog commenter guy. So that's where this had gotten to. It had gotten to this mixed up, weird presentation of the truth. Who was this person? And for some reason, somehow, all the way through these 3.5, almost 4 years until Bond shared his side of the story, no one had looked into this. Sam, do you remember seeing anything online where someone looked into this story?
Oh, I saw a lot of speculation. A lot of people who looked really closely at the image to try to find the touches of Photoshop or something like that. But I didn't find a single thing where somebody actually reached out to Bret or Glenn Bond to try to verify the story. It was all just that can't be real. That I don't trust anything on the internet, and I don't trust anything I see on the news. And because it was relegated to, kind of hunting and conspiratorial and Alaskan message boards, you ran into a lot of people who are very suspicious of a lot of things. But no, I didn't find a single outlet that actually wanted to verify this, from the horse's mouth.
And I know that Joe and I, and you too, Sam, I read a lot of message boards comments. I read a lot of threads on articles. I read a lot of random Twitter feeds trying to find someone who was going to be like, I was there. And in fact, we found a lot of people that were like, I talked to a pilot that flew the guy, or I talked to a sled dog team guy who happened to drive by. Like, there was a lot of people who were claiming to have knowledge of this that clearly just did not. And I think that just denotes how something becomes like an urban legend where, there's this application of rumor and speculation to something so salacious as this.
Yeah, then it kind of created a vacuum that he didn't do any interviews right after the attack. And it's also worth mentioning that he was out hunting for several weeks after the attack and may have been unavailable if reporters had reached out to him, but it doesn't sound like he returned their calls anyway. But, the nature abhors a vacuum, and I would suggest that the internet does too. So people basically had these images and needed to ascribe them to something and just made up a bunch of stuff, but nobody really took the time to find out what the truth was.
Yeah. So I think that actually wraps up kind of what we'll call the urban legend part of the story, like why we're getting to a point now where you're hearing the first account from Bret Bond in audio of this, and a lot of the discovery that the three of us did. And Phil's just sitting there, just gripping his mic. So he can barely hold it in. He's so excited to hear this tale.
Just soaking it in again, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. It's good to see you. It's good to be sitting next to you.
He probably wants to see the video. Is what he really wants. He's just waiting to see the video.
Wants to see the video.
Nope.
And so, look, in a time of quarantine, when we're all grasping for things like Tiger King and stories to captivate us. Everybody's been watching the Michael Jordan documentary, things like that. Like, we're all looking for stories that we can rehash, and this is just one of them. So that's what I would just say is the urban legend part of this. That's how it got to be where it is today, where a man takes some images off his phone, I believe, Bret, and shares them to Instagram, and people start to comment, "Oh, Wes Perkins. Oh man, I've known about that story for 3 years," when they obviously have no idea what they're talking about.
O'Reilly Auto Parts are in the business of keeping your car on the road. O'Reilly Auto Parts offer friendly, helpful service and the parts knowledge you need for all your maintenance and repairs. If you're confused about what part you need, like what wipers are going to be the best, what replacement headlights are going to be the best, go into O'Reilly and talk to the people that work there, because they're great and they're super friendly, and they'll get you squared away where you walk out knowing you got the right thing. They've got thousands of parts and accessories in stock, either in-store or online, so you never have to worry if you're in a jam. Do you need your windshield wipers replaced? You need a brake light fixed? You need some quick service? They'll help you find the right part or point you to the nearest local repair shop for help. The professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts are your one-stop shop for all things auto do-it-yourself, and you can find what you need in-store or online. Stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit us at O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. That's O'ReillyAuto.com/MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
So in an effort to just let Bret tell the bear attack story, we're going to skip a lot of things here. We're going to land, weirdly enough, when Bret and his dad get back to the lodge after their 24-mile snow machine ride. We were able to, in an effort to make sure that we talked to some credible witnesses and people that could confirm, able to talk to the pilot. What was the official flight company name? Like Alaska?
Life Med Alaska.
Life Med Alaska. The pilot, his name is Bret Westcott. Tell us a little bit about, Joe, you talked to Bret. Tell us a little bit about this Bret Westcott.
Yep. So Bret, the conversation with him was probably the most reassuring conversation that I've had that this actually happened. Like when I talked to him, I was like, "Yep, okay."
Let me back up one step, and I'll have to be careful with this one. We had an off-the-record comment from an official with an agency, won't say who, that straight up said these photos are fake.
Yep.
To you.
Yep.
Someone with close adjacency to the
someone
situation, not an eyewitness, but someone who would know.
Yeah, we would say someone involved in the investigation who would have known or would have had purview to things that we wouldn't have at that time known.
Yep.
This person comes in and says, at the end of a conversation with Joe, "Oh, hey, just so you know, those photos are fake."
Yeah, just dropped it out of nowhere, and that was pretty much the conversation ender.
And it throws us for a loop, because we're now in a position where I just had told, I think maybe that same day, finally told Joe, like, I believe this shit, and I don't think there's anything that's gonna kick me off this, because I've just, after hearing from Bret and hearing from his mother and reading things and looking at things, everything lines up, all of it fits.
And right before that conversation, the three of us were talking and like, yep, we believe them. I think these photos are real.
Yeah.
And then I call you guys back 45 minutes later. Holy shit, someone said they're fake.
Not just some,
someone credible,
a very credible source said off the record that these are fake. Now, it turns out that probably was more conjecture than truth, but it's certainly threw us for a loop. But Bret Westcott kind of helped us.
Yep, Bret Westcott definitely helped. So, little background on him. He's a retired helicopter pilot from the Army, and now flies for Life Med Alaska. And so him and his team, Brian Anderson and Paul Garnett, were the ones who responded to this case. They flew out, met Bret and Glenn at the lodge there, and went to pick him up. And Bret Westcott told me, when I asked him, he said, what was his condition when you got there? Like, were those images reality? Like, is that the way he looked when you got to him? And he said, actually, the images were fairly mild. After the 24-mile snowmobile ride over spring snow, very rough riding, he said the rest of the skin had sloughed off of his face, and anything that was still remaining, like over his chin and bottom lip, had been removed.
Yeah. Phil, my lord.
Yeah, when he said that, I got a little queasy. But talking to him, Bret was in shock that he was still alive. He was saying that Glenn is one of the toughest men he's ever seen, and he was still aware. He was up and still aware and talking. He had blood pouring out of his face.
Yeah, you'll hear from Bret here coming up about kind of their after, because part of Miles Nolte was on the show last week. When I first showed this stuff to Miles, I'm like, what do you think of these photos? He's like, fake. Why? Well, who would take them? Why would you take that picture? What could motivate someone to take a picture? And so luckily we got that answered from Bret, but still, you're still kind of taken aback that this photo exists. So, but Bret, I was relieved when Bret Westcott kind of came into the frame. I knew about him. I've heard in talking to Lorraine Phillips, heard about him. She sent me a photo of him and Glenn. They had met years after the attack and chatted. She gave me his first name. I had to go and do a bunch of research to try to find what Bret pilot works for Alaska Life Med, and found him, and then sicked Joe on it, and you went and got a hold of him.
Yep.
And he said a lot of amazing things, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of amazing things. He believed that Glenn was very, very lucky. He even went so far to say he's alive because of the grace of God and nothing else, pretty much. He's like, whatever we didn't save him. Like, it was his sure will to live. And he was very complimentary of how tough he was. He said that he reminded him of special operators in the Army. He had that same sort of mentality, and even though he was mortally injured, like, he was on his deathbed, basically, he was still aware. He was focused on the mission, and even told Bret where to turn the helicopter when they encountered some high elevation clouds. He said, turn down this valley, we'll get there quicker.
Yeah, that's an amazing part of this whole thing for me, is that you'll find out through, and as we go through this story, you'll find out that Glenn Bond was basically just directing the show.
Yeah.
Throughout all this.
He was up and ready and raring to go. He was calming down the flight medic and the flight nurse, just talking like, oh, I'll be all right. I've had worse type of things.
Do you have the audio? You pull up the audio of his of the video that Bret posted where he's talking about, his dad's talking about what they need to be doing.
The keep the level head one. Let me pull it up here really quick.
Okay, we got to get out of here.
Let's just keep our heads cool.
Okay, we'll keep our heads cool.
Our face must be good.
They're
okay,
short
we got to
clips.
get out of here.
Let's just keep our heads cool.
Okay, we'll keep our heads cool.
Our face must be good.
Oof.
Like, at the end of that video, it sounds like he's saying, my face must be gone.
Yeah, I mean, what a... I know you're just listening to this and you can't watch it with us, but...
Phil, do you want to see it?
Phil, you want to check it out? No.
Are you sure?
You sure, buddy?
I'm sure.
You sure?
Okay. Man, the artwork in the studio is impressive.
So you get to this point in the story, and you're like, you'll hear it from Bret coming up. You're like, whoa! Like, Bret Bond is saves his dad. His dad gets his face ripped off, and then he's directing his son like, let's take my photo. Let's get on the machine here. Let's drive this way. I'll hold on this way. Then the medevac helicopter comes to the lodge, and he's like, let's go this direction. It's at this point where he starts to direct his medical care and say that I don't want to go to this hospital. I don't want to go to Providence Medical. I want to go somewhere else. I don't want any pain meds. I don't want any blood transfusions. This is at the point where this guy is confirmed by both Lorraine Phillips, who sent me his medical chart, and Bret Westcott, who's telling you all this. This dude I can't even explain the trauma.
Yeah. Well, they were in awe. The medical team on that helicopter, they were just in awe. Bret even told me that Paul Garnett, at one point, he was changing his gloves so frequently because there was so much blood and coming out of Glenn's face. He was changing them so frequently that at one point, he's like, fuck it. I'm not changing these anymore. I want this tough bastard's blood in my blood.
Like to combine bloods. Yeah. Can we please combine our bloods together?
Sounds unsafe.
Right, but he was refusing pain meds.
Sounds medically unsound.
Yeah. Sounds like if the flag says, let's mix our bloods. You're like, no.
How about no?
Keep your blood out of my blood, son.
Yeah.
But that's just like, this is where we start. We're about to get to maybe the twist, the biggest twist here. But this is where you start to, and there were rumors. I know, Sam, you probably read them. I read them too online, where they were like, and the guy didn't take pain meds. It was. I saw a lot of comments in messengers threads where this was part of the urban legend. And the fact that you brought it up, I think I was on the phone with Lorraine Phillips, as I mentioned, Bret's mom, Glenn's wife. The way that came about is I called Dr. Susan Dean. Dr. Susan Dean's office, Matsu General or just Matsu Hospital?
Well, I don't think that's her office. That's where they went, and she was on staff there that day and got really lucky. That was another thing that Bret said was very lucky.
She happened to be
the one reconstructive surgeon was there when they got there.
Yeah. So they decided that this is where they want to go. And Bret kind of explained to me how they picked that place, but we're going to explain to you in a minute why they didn't want to go anywhere else and why they were skeptical about pain meds and all that stuff. But this is where this thing starts to get, you start to learn. It's one thing to see that Diamond D photo where 9 days later this dude miraculously somehow just has a nose again and has lips and a chin and it just looks like they just stitched him up through the center. That's one thing. But then to hear about exactly the details of how that all went down from the folks that were a part of it is even crazier. It's just crazier. But we're for sure at the point where now you have Glenn Bond, who's in a ridiculous state. He's even worse than the photos we've seen. He somehow can see. I don't even know how he could even see to look out the window of a helicopter and direct the pilot as to where to go. And he's the one, as we just heard in the audio, staying calm through all of this. He's just a tough sumbitch, as our flight medic says. But you always ask the question, we've already asked it a couple of times. Why is it that they didn't want to go to Providence Medical Hospital or any other hospital? Why is it that they picked Matsu? And why is it that, as Bret Westcott told us, Bret Bond was being a little combative and at the time when they landed to get to take his dad to the hospital? This is a tangent. This is what we'll call a tangent. But it's a relevant one.
It's a big one.
Yeah. It's highly relevant to their just general distrust of medicine and medical professionals that was very much on display throughout the rescue effort and the treatment. And this one was not hard to locate.
That's where when Sam and I first started talking about this, I was just Google Bret Bond or even Glenn Bond, and this is what comes up. This story.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Sam. I just want to. When you told me that we were interviewing this guy, he was a part of a bear attack in Alaska. It's kind of a crazy story, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. So I Googled him. Nothing about a bear attack. What you're talking about was the only story I came across, and I was like, is this the same guy? How many Bret Bonds in Alaska are there?
I think all of us, when we heard about this, I did the same thing. I'm reading this, I'm like, and that's when I first started reaching out to people going, wait a minute. I'm confounded, confused, kind of excited to help try to tell the truth here. After I talked to Bret, I think I even told Anthony Licata, I said, I respect this dude because he straight up just said, like, yeah, I could come on your podcast, but I'm going to take some time to think about it. I'm not going to jump into something like this. And I'll let you know if I decide to do it. It happened 4 years ago, and it's my dad's story, not my story. So immediately I was like, respect. But then you start reading into this, and you're like, man, this isn't just, no wonder he's being this way. No wonder he's cautious about this. So Sam, take us through a little bit about what we're actually talking about.
So, yeah, what we're actually talking about also goes back to a bear hunting trip. Not surprising, knowing Glenn and Bret Bond. So Bret was guiding bear hunters on the Alaska Peninsula in October of 2013. So this is about 3 years prior to his father being attacked. Bret had been taking prednisone, which is a steroid. He'd been taking that nasally for nasal polyps. When he was out on this hunt, he was experiencing terrible insomnia. And he hadn't slept for 11 days when he returned from this bear hunt. and his parents took him to Providence Hospital, the dovetail to what we're talking about here. The doctors gave him lorazepam and zolpidem, which help with anxiety and sleep deprivation, and released him. The next day, when he's back home, Bret started having seizures. And then a couple days later, his parents took him back to the hospital, where his condition continued to deteriorate. He started to be delirious, he started to hallucinate, and even became unresponsive from time to time. He was, obviously admitted to the hospital, and doctors were working furiously trying to figure out what was going on with him. And I think it's worth mentioning that Providence is one of the top hospitals in Alaska, Anchorage being by far and away the biggest city in Alaska. Something like 70% of Alaskans live within 10 miles of Anchorage. So this is a highly regarded institution. Couldn't figure out what was going on, but pretty quickly there started to become contention between primarily Bret's mother, but also his father and the hospital staff. There's a quote from sealed court documents regarding this, which were surfaced by Police State USA, which apparently is defunct now. But Miss Phillips began to intentionally interrupt and interfere with Mr. Bond's care. And that's not speculation. That's from State of Alaska court documents. So his mom, Lorraine, was very concerned that the medical professionals and the doctors at this hospital did not have Bret's best interest in mind. I am not entirely sure where that derived from, but I think she thought that the medications that he was receiving were what was contributing to this condition, not seeking to mitigate it.
She made clear to me in our conversations, I didn't, and also with Bret, I didn't want to push this. This is something I think, as Lorraine Phillips told me when we talked, it's been reported on. Mm-hmm. She said, just go look at my Facebook page. I post about it all the time. We didn't talk about it in depth, but she just said, look at these documents. And that's what we did. And so I think, as you said, this is all public record. This story that you're telling is not a story that just happened locally.
There's an overwhelming amount of news coverage.
Yeah, there was a Facebook page entitled Free Bret Bond that was there at the time as his parents, as we'll get into, his parents fight that. But just for scope here, we're dealing with yet another extraordinary event in someone's life. One, just to be hospitalized for those reasons, and two, to go through what you're about to describe. And so, in talking to Lorraine Phillips a week ago, she believes wholeheartedly that they did not have his best interest in mind, and that they're still in the wrong. And the distrust is clear, it's very clear. And that distrust is not only Lorraine; it's clear from what we heard from Bret Westcott and what we heard from others that Bret and Glenn, maybe rightfully so, but especially given what they believe to be the truth, it's clear that distrust is there, and it plays out through the bear attack. But continue with what happens.
Well, basically, so into November, they were seeking to pull Bret out of the hospital, and the hospital started having to post security, and there were like physical confrontations, and they were picketing in front of the hospital, free Bret. They had hired a lawyer who I believe was a friend at the time, Rhonda Butterfield. But in December, she discontinued her legal service of the bonds in order to tell the court that she had heard Lorraine say that she would rather Bret die in her arms than have any more drugs, that she was starting to make funeral arrangements, and that she should have shot him while I had the chance. And Lorraine denies saying these things, and any of us can choose to believe her or not. I'm just reporting it as it has been reported in the past. She told the Anchorage Daily News their lies and someone else's thoughts, and then the court ran with it. So whether or not she said that, Superior Court in Alaska, bought it because the hospital requested assistance because they knew Bret was in a really bad state, and then if he was removed from the hospital, they thought he was going to die. And so in December, with these statements, alleged statements coming to light, they applied to the Office of Public Advocacy to have to get temporary guardian status over Bret, and then by January, in 12 days of hearings and the opinions of 6 neurologists, Bret was appointed as a ward of the state. And his parents legally had guardianship over him through a will or something that he had signed, but that was given to the state of Alaska pursuant of protecting his health, because they were gravely concerned that if he came off the regimen of medicine that he was going to probably die. This came I believe right after he was finally diagnosed, and that diagnosis was with autoimmune encephalitis. It's an infection, very rare, but it causes a person's immune system to attack their brain and start to degrade it. Really bad, but a known condition, and at least now they understand what it was. And I've looked into this just briefly enough to know that that the symptoms are very confounding, and it's difficult to arrive at that diagnosis. But at this point, he is officially under the protective guardianship of the state of Alaska. He continued to be treated at Providence until March, when he was transferred to the Harborview Medical Center in Seattle, which is one of the top hospitals in the country. It's associated with University of Washington Medical School. I've been there personally. And so they flew him down there. Bret's parents also went down there. And I believe there was a time when it was all okay. They were able to visit him, and everything was going all right, sort of. But then on April 22nd, a nurse was wheeling Bret in a wheelchair down the halls of Harborview and entered a elevator. And as the doors were closing, the nurse was shoved from the back outside of the elevator, and Bret disappeared. They called the police, knowing that, there's this security risk surrounding Bret. And the police went to the hotel where they knew his parents were staying. And then from there were able to figure out that they had taken him to a neighborhood clinic where Lorraine had admitted Bret to have him treated for drug withdrawal, because her belief is that the psychotropic drugs that they were issuing him were, in fact, generating this condition that he was suffering from. And, by this point, you mentioned the Free Bret Bond Facebook page. There was a national outcry against this.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole other rabbit hole on medical incarceration. And I'm still not entirely clear how people frame this, or like why they think these evil doctors are trying to body snatch people.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who believe this. And so there was a little bit of an echo chamber going on. Lorraine was charged with kidnapping, and Bret was returned to the hospital. But then a month later, he was recovered, released from the medical guardianship of the state, and went to stay with family in Idaho. But this story endures, completely separate from the bear incident, but as kind of a quasi deep state conspiracy. And he's really held up as one of these examples of some secret cabal of doctors that medically incarcerate people for nefarious purposes.
Right. Yeah, and that when we're looking at this, especially in talking to Bret about it, which I haven't done much of, I know we probably mentioned it a couple times. I mostly talked to Lorraine about it because she was very open about her feelings. And to me, when we first came across this, I thought, and I know we talked about this, Sam, I thought, well, interesting. How relevant? I'm not sure. Probably not all that relevant in terms of a guy gets attacked by a bear and survives. Probably not. But as we got into the story, and you kind of start to see, the lack of trust in the media, which I'm sure that Lorraine and Bret and family felt at some level scorned by in this. I'm only guessing at that. There was some level of distrust there. Lorraine articulated to me in our conversation that she still felt an extreme level of distrust with Providence Medical, and there was a lawsuit in the Supreme Court of Alaska.
There is a lawsuit. Yeah. I found it where she names some 18 different plaintiffs, including doctors and Providence Medical as a whole, and I believe Harborview too.
She is not shy about that feeling. I'm not here to comment on its truth or untruth. I can tell you that the bear attack narrative is true. I could sit here and tell you that. I'm willing to with what I know and what Joe and Sam helped me find out that this is true. What Sam went through and what we'll report in the story is what we got from court documents and from already published media materials. And so we're not going to skip over that.
Yeah, and I tried to say that with as little editorialism as possible, and I don't want to discount the power of prayer for healing, because people truly believe in that, and I'm not gonna sit here and say they're wrong. I'm just telling you what happened after what I have learned from reading dozens upon dozens of stories about
this. And so that there that is. I think that does inform why Glenn Bond didn't want to go to the Providence Medical Hospital or be treated by their doctors. He wanted to go somewhere else, and they landed on Matsu, was a hospital where Dr. Susan Dean was. And I haven't gotten this comment directly from Bret, but like I said, my take on it, my personal take after talking to everybody involved, is that at some level, after you go through something like that, you're going to be way, way, way more guarded about everything in your life, specifically things like this bear attack. And so here we are, like I said, that was a twist in this story that didn't see coming when I first started talking to Bret. I feel we have to treat it with kid gloves because it's there's two sides to every story, and there's certainly two sides to this one. But there it is. It's part of this tale. Phil, do you have any questions at this point that you would like to ask?
Does Bret? You don't have to. If he talks about this in the interview, don't comment on it. But is he aligned with his mother about how he was treated?
We didn't talk about it.
Okay.
Partly because in the interview, I wasn't really. We hadn't done the rest of the investigation when I talked to Bret. But him and I really haven't talked about it to this day. Like I said, I talked to Lorraine about it. She feels strongly, and that's where we currently are.
He has posted about it on his Facebook.
I would almost, and I'd be willing to confirm this with him after we hit the off button here on the record, that I would be willing to speculate that he agrees with his mother. That I'd be willing to speculate, given what we know about how he was acting, in terms of when Bret Westcott and his team showed up. Bret did tell us that he was being a bit combative. He was taking photos of their badges and getting evidence and making sure that his dad went where his dad wanted to go.
He even went so far as to say that he wanted one of the flight medical crew to stay behind so that he could go with his dad, because he did not trust them going without him.
Yep. So that there's like I said, I still don't want to have this whole thing be about that, but that's just part of it. And it informs all these crazy things that happened. But then we get to, one person we haven't talked to, I wish we could. There's some circumstances where we haven't been able to talk to Dr. Susan Dean, who is the plastic surgeon, the surgeon that was on call on staff at the hospital where Bret Westcott landed his helicopter, and they rushed Glenn Bond to surgery. But according to Lorraine Phillips, and like I said, she sent me his medical chart. He was in there for 6.5 days, if I remember correctly. I think I do. 6.5 days, and he had one surgery. One. The instructions were no pain medication, no blood transfusion, and only mild sedation. And it said extubate as soon as possible on his medical chart as well. And so here is a situation where this man is like, I'm not going to say it was the worst trauma that someone can go through, but boy, pain meds would have probably been nice for most people.
Yeah, and I mean every person we talked to saw the scene. Just, I mean, even Bret just couldn't describe how much blood had been lost, and to not have any additional blood added to his system is
it's amazing that we would return at some point to the photo in Diamond D Custom Leather, where 9 days later, here's a guy who, I mean, it was, I don't know. I know in the interview you talked to Bret Westcott, he talks about the golden hour in terms of like, you get whacked like this, there's an hour to get care.
Yeah.
And as you'll hear from Bret soon, it's hours. I mean, probably 4 or 5 hours if you add it all up.
I think it ended up being like 4.5 hours from the time he was attacked by the bear until he hit the ground in the...
Yep. There's one surgery in which, I don't know the details of it, but there was mild sedation involved, which means he probably wasn't fully out, or if he was out, it wasn't for very long. They fix his face. 6.5 days later, he's out. 9 days later, he's taking a photo in Diamond D Custom Leather. Mm-hmm. Those things we know for sure that those things happen. They are corroborated by multiple sources. And so I guess that led us to the one doctor. There's 3 surgeons. There was an eye surgeon, an ear surgeon, and then Dr. Susan Dean, who did the initial surgery. Both of those, the eye and ear doctor, were in Idaho. Both of them, correct me if I'm wrong, were around 2018 they were performed.
Yes.
As secondary surgeries. And you talked to the ear doctor.
The ear doctor, yep.
Tell us about that.
Dr. Crawford. He confirmed, again, just how tough Glenn is and what a great attitude he had about the whole ordeal. But so what Dr. Crawford did was he fixed the ear canal. The ear that was ripped off and reattached by Dr. Dean, everything was still functional underneath that ear that was reattached. So basically what he did, he went in and opened up that ear canal again so that he was able to use his ear. And he confirmed after that, he's like, yep, no pain pills, and he never came back for a post-op. Like, he was just like...
And then I think he called Bret later, or he called Glenn later, and Glenn was like, yeah, I hear myself pissing for the first time. That's fun.
Yeah, Glenn actually called the office just a couple days after the whole ordeal, and he's like, this is great. I could hear myself pissing in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There we are. I mean, I'm sure there's other things that we missed here. As Bret told me the other day on the phone, you don't know half the story. And I'm sure that we're going to continue investigating this and looking into it and trying to make sure the truth is there in spades. You will see an article coming in the next week or so to themeateater.com that will run this all out in detail. All the interviews we've done, all the investigative work that we've done to help. The way that I look at it, I don't know the way you guys look at it. I know neither of you have talked to Bret or his mother, but I have. And the way I look at it, and I truly look at it this way, is that we're in the unique position to help them tell the truth, in terms of the bear attack. I went through this journey where I didn't think it was true. Then I thought it was true. Then that was challenged, and then we went back and triple checked it, and basically everything that Bret has said checks out. I can't think of anything, Joe or Sam, that he said that I checked on and it wasn't corroborated by someone else credibly. Can't think of anything.
You know, the only thing that stands out to me is, you know, a question we haven't quite answered yet here is why why now?
Yeah.
Why 4 years later? Why did he ignore the media attention then, but then sought it this year in March? And he explained it very, very briefly.
You'll hear it in this interview.
And it's kind of indicative of who he is and who his family is when he said that he's a private person.
Yeah.
But now you're not. It just it leaves a big question that's not answerable, not verifiable, but it's very intriguing.
Yeah, and he talks about, you would imagine that it's the timing where the question comes in, right? That he would feel the need to clarify is not surprising, given what we know. That it took this long to get the clarification is where I'm like, okay. Why? He explains it, and you got to take him at his word.
Mm-hmm.
And that, like you say, that is the one part where you're like, why so long? Here we are.
Yeah, and you could see wanting to set the record straight. You could see wanting to promote your business.
And he admits that part, and you'll hear him say, like, he knew that during quarantine that he knew he had a viral story on his hands, and he knew that during quarantine people would be on their phones, and he wanted
had a
captive audience, and he was smart about it. And then here we are, And again, what's today? May something, 20 something? I don't know. I lost count.
18th.
I was close. He posted that stuff on March 20th. He shared some of the story with he mentions it in the interview a couple of places on Instagram. But there's been no big coverage of this. This is the first, what we're doing right now is the first time anyone's hearing a lot of this connected to this bear attack. And that is, again, knowing Bret a couple of weeks that's by design. And so that all mixes together in what we'll call an urban legend here. And so what you're about to hear is Bret's first time on a podcast. He didn't really, like I said, didn't know what it was when I first talked to him. You're about to hear the first time that he talks about this publicly, outside of his own Instagram channel. That's and the first time that Lorraine Phillips, to my knowledge, has talked about this publicly. The first time that Bret Westcott had talked about this publicly. That all that'll be included in our article. But so what you're about to hear is Bret's account. I can vote. I believe him. I 100% think this is all true. It is amazing. He's a hero. His dad is the toughest son of a bitch alive. Now enjoy Bret Bond telling his story that day on Denali Highway. Bret, how's it going, man?
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Good.
Doing pretty good.
Good. We're back in the studio. You and I have been talking for a couple of weeks about doing this, and I've been stuck at home doing these podcasts, but we're finally back in the studio, so thanks for a perfect excuse to get back in here.
Yeah, no problem. Sounds good.
How are things in Alaska, man?
It's going good. Minus non-residents can't hunt, so work's a little slow, but out there just being a resident, enjoying hunting. So.
Yeah, what's the, from your perspective, we've talked a lot here at Meat Eater and even on this podcast about helping the guiding community, because that's here locally in Montana, the fly fishing community's been hit hard, the hunting community's been hit hard. What's your perspective on, being a guide and trying to keep a business going? I'm sure cancellations and things popping up.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, it's all new to me, but as far as, this closure and stuff, but I'm hoping for the best. I'm just trying to stay positive. I'm looking forward to June 1st, and I'm just telling my clients and stuff just to continue on, and hopefully everything will get released and we'll be good to go June 1st. I don't know what else to do. I'm just waiting for further notice. So. Yeah,
you were telling me you've been doing some hunting yourself?
Yeah, done some hunting. Got a few bears. Been on 4 bear hunts in the last week. It's been fun. So. Good, man. Good. Well, I'm glad you're still doing what you love to do. We want to, there's a lot of things we want to cover here today. Everybody's going to want to hear about the attack that became viral a couple weeks ago on Instagram and elsewhere. But I
I want to, hear about you first, hear about your family, hear about how you grew up in Alaska. Alaska's a place that's near and dear to my heart just because it's wild as hell, and I love to visit it, but you grew up in it and had a lot of good experiences. So you started hunting at what age, man?
I started hunting young. It was probably, my memories would be probably 3, 4, hunting rabbits, snowshoe hares up here in Alaska. I started out plinking with the BB gun, and that was probably my first memories, was shooting rabbits and squirrels. So,
yeah, was your dad the first guy to take you out, or did you have family members that did, or what introduced you to running around outside?
Yeah, it was my dad and mom. Dad and mom, they would take me out right away. So, I was snow machining there at 6 weeks old. They had me on the back of the snow machine, and my parents took me out right away. So I was fortunate enough to be born right here in the last frontier and was living the life. So
your parents, what was their background? I know, they taught you to love the outdoors, but what were they like growing up?
Well, my dad was born in Colorado, and he came up here in 1966 and as a school teacher, and started out in Natick and then went to Anchorage in 1968. And he was on beluga hunts and seals and all that stuff, but before that act came around in 1972. So he has a big hunting background in Colorado. My mom was basically born here. She's been here since 9 months old, and she didn't really have a hunting background, but when she met my dad in the early 80s or whatever, she was the big hunter. So I kind of took her spot, over officially, kind of when I was about 12 years old. So, but as far as the hunting goes, so
yeah, I read on your website you killed your first caribou when you were 7.
Yep, first caribou at 7, first moose at 8. Should have had my first moose the same year as my caribou when I was 7, but it was a 22-250 my dad had. It was a regular sized gun, and he cut the stock in half for me. And after that caribou hunt, I wasn't really looking forward to carrying that gun. So my dad told me on the moose hunt, he says, if you can't carry your own rifle, you can't shoot it. So I watched my dad shoot a moose right in front of me when I was 7. And then finally, the next year, I carried my gun and shot the moose, shot a moose. So, yeah, it was actually a lot bigger moose. So I was happy for that.
Yeah, your relationship with your dad, because we'll get to what happened 4 years ago, but how would you describe your relationship with your dad? Are you guys close, best friends, hunting partners? How would you describe that to folks?
We're pretty close. After the attack, it kind of changed things a little bit. We used to kind of be guiding. He used to guide too. So he retired school teacher in '92 and started guiding when he was 1993. And he was assistant guide all the way up until October 2015, so 6 months before the attack. And he's the reason why I got into guiding, basically. So the master guide that he was employed with the last 10 years or so of his career was bugging me. So finally, after I graduated college, I started guiding and kind of turned it into a career at this point. So I enjoy it. But as far as relationship goes, we still go out and stuff. Obviously, we were hunting together in 2016. And actually, I thought just moments before the attack, I thought this is going to be pretty cool. I'm going to be in a picture with him. He was in my picture when I was 7 years old. And he was 77 at the time. And I thought I was actually visualizing taking pictures. And then the attack happened. So, but as far as hunting nowadays, we went out hunting last year, didn't get anything, but hoping here in the future that this year we're going to go out hunting again because he can't hold a normal gun. So we got him a stock with a hole in it. So I'm hoping to get him a moose or something with this 338 this year. So
yeah. Hey, being a guide, I was reading a lot about your service, the bbalaska.com. If you want to go, whenever this COVID damn thing clears up, you want to go visit Bret up there and pay for services. What's it like being a guide? Is it everything you thought it would be? I know, your business is good. Looking at your Instagram account, there's you guys are taking a lot of great animals and you're a great part of the country. So what's the career as a guide like?
Well, I enjoy it. I don't even think I'm working because I do it for fun when I'm not. If I'm not guiding, I'm hunting for fun. It's something that I enjoy. In my opinion, being right there and saying, shoot the animals, I get the same rush as when I'm holding the rifle and I'm shooting the animal. It's a great way to, share Alaska with others. I totally love what I do. I couldn't see myself doing anything else. And I don't know. It's just, things obviously, times are a little different right now. But I'm hoping that everything will resume to normal without any changes like it used to be. But just trying to be optimistic about it.
Yeah. Well, as we move to the attack, I think, before we really get into the attack itself, from your perspectives, we don't have your dad on, and we're not going to tell his story for him. When you decided you told me when I first started messaging you about this, because I want to say that hundreds of people sent me the link to your original post. It had to have been hundreds of people, and then coworkers, family members. A lot of people were talking about it when you posted. And when I first started messaging you about this, you just said, man, it was 4 years ago. And there was so much that was unknown about the photos and the attack and who you guys were. Why? I think the core question for me, other than just getting the details out about this attack, is why did you post it when you did?
Why did I post it when I did? Well, 4 years ago, I think it was about 3 weeks after I actually went hunting, and I was out of service for about 20 days shortly after the attack. When I got back, I got 20, 25 messages saying that 3 or 4 of my pictures are viral online, and then I started seeing it over the years, and just a lot of people saying it's fake, and all these stories that rise up, and all these accounts saying they know what happened, and this blah blah blah, and a lot of other names being put on the photo and saying it's somebody else. And I don't know, like once, this quarantine started happening, I kind of figured, what can I do for my business? And kind of sat down. I thought, well, everybody's going to be on their phones at home, so maybe I'll share a little bit of my video to kind of show. Mainly, I was just trying to show people it's not fake, and then I was trying to emphasize hashtag save a life, carry a handgun. And I was just trying to share, my story and what happened, and hopefully it'll save somebody else's life someday.
Yeah. And I want to talk a lot about that part of it too, given your experience as a guide and as a kid growing up in bear country, and then this experience in and of itself. Did you, when you made that post? I know what the photos and videos are, that they will draw attention. You mentioned that. Was there any surprise when it went, I guess, re-viral or blew up during the quarantine the way it did?
No, I knew it was going to blow up viral. Obviously, it was a little slow because I was just on my private account, with 600 some followers. But once it took, a day or two, and then boom, it shot off. I went viral, and then I was getting a lot of DMs. So I figured, well, I'll just do I'll share a little bit more of the story, a little post. So I ended up doing 4 posts, and actually collaborated with North American Rescue on Instagram. And they did a couple posts, kind of more of the medical side of it, because everybody's kind of can't understand how he was talking and stuff. And we explained that a little bit, and my medical background, and kind of what played out as far as his airway and all that stuff. So that's on North American Rescue on Instagram there.
Yeah, let's get into that really quick.
Okay.
What is your? I know you're licensed by the U.S. Coast Guard. You receive your 50-ton Master Coast Guard license. There's a bunch of other things, standard first aid, adult AED training that you've gone through. You hold a certificate in training in wilderness remote first aid as well. So just take us through that. Why do you feel like it's necessary to get those trainings, and where, that knowledge base?
Well, how I started doing it was basically a requirement for guiding and wilderness safety specialists, aka bear guard. I've been bear guarding for 10 years and guiding for 10 years, so I've been doing those 2 career paths basically for the last 10 years together. And a lot of the training interlocks. Learn to return systems there in Anchorage. I've done most of my training, and actually I did like one of their upper level classes actually just exactly a year before, and that was basically in the back of my mind when I walked up to my dad, doing my medical assessment, the airways, the bleeding, and stuff like that, and going through that in my mind, the checklist. It's good to have, I would say, definitely in the backcountry. Just anybody should have it, even if you don't even have to be a guide or be a bear guard or professional, career in the outdoors. Just anybody that enjoys the outdoors that is exposed to it should basically, I would recommend basically having that background training, especially when you're in bear country.
Yeah, can you talk about? I know when North American Rescue is. When I read about this from them, the story you shared, they talk about a March assessment. Can you talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, just going through that. I was when I first got up to him. Of course, I look at him, and my first impression, was okay. This is going to be about 10 seconds, and I'm going to watch him, croak right in front of my eyes. But to my amazement, he was talking, coherent, conscious, like. It was amazing. Like once impact happened, everything went in our favor. I mean, he still had one eye, so he could still see me. Obviously, he didn't have a mirror out there, so he didn't panic at all. I had to look at him, but he didn't have to look at himself. He still had an ear left, so he can still hear me. No major blood loss. So that was my first thing. I was just checking him, doing the pat down that Learn to Return taught me. He had a lot of winter clothes on and snow pants. I saw a little bit of blood on him, but later on found out that he actually had claw marks in his butt from the bear. That's one thing I missed during my assessment. But mainly his hands. That was the only thing he complained about was his wrist. And talking to one of the surgeons about a week later after the first initial surgery, he says canine went into his wrist and hit that artery and pushed it out of the way. So he said you would have had about 10 minutes to react to that. So fortunately, I really didn't have to do any medical treatment on him. Like probably 25 minutes, he asked me to tie up his face. So I grabbed his face and he handed me his handkerchief. And I did attempt to tie it on. I think I got maybe half the knot done. And he was choking on himself. So I just let his face hang back down and just kind of went with that. So very fortunate.
Yeah, very fortunate. The instincts that you have in the face of something like that, when you're looking at your father in that, and everybody who's hopefully, seen the photos and read the story, you'll know, I'm sure it was a gruesome sight, and you were able to kind of let those instincts and your training kick in and do all the right things to make sure, you saved his life. So I think, as we get ready to tell the story here, I just want to make sure that people understand your commitment to what's impressed me about talking to you prior to this, your commitment to this, your commitment to teaching people this, what I would say is this essential skill and essential craft, and then how it played itself out in this situation, I think is equally amazing. So let's rewind the clock a little bit and back to, where were you guys? What were you hunting? Why did you decide to go out? Give people kind of the backstory to the hunt itself.
Okay. Well, it was April. So obviously it was mid-April. It was actually tax day to be exact on his attack, mid-April. But we just decided to go out April spring bear hunting, on snow machine and try to get a bear that's freshly out of the den and rubs on it. And I kind of wanted to see my dad shoot a bear because, he was getting up there in age. Back then he was 77 and he wanted to go out and shoot a bear. And I was just looking forward to, getting him a bear. We decided to go in interior Alaska. We're hunting in the Alaska range and on snow machine. And
is this something you guys have done a lot before? It sounds like your dad hadn't bear hunted often.
Oh yeah. He's been guiding Peninsula, Kodiak, lot of 10-footers. He actually got attacked back in 2007 on Kodiak. He was guiding a client, and there was another guide with him that already finished up, so he was with him. And my dad was guiding his client, and they actually saw these two bears the day before. They thought it was a big sow and a boar, but it ended up being a 9.5-foot boar and a 10-foot boar. They actually call them the queer bears of Buck Valley. They actually shot the 9.5-footer, and they were just getting up to it, I guess. I mean, I wasn't there, so I'm just telling you the brief of it. And all of a sudden, the other guide was a little bit behind, yelling, "He's going to get you, Glenn. He's going to get you, Glenn." And then there comes the alders moving, and my dad and the hunter jacked rounds in their rifle, and my dad said, "As soon as you see the bear, shoot." And the hunter shot it, and then my dad shot it right in the head, and it skidded right in front of him. So I guess it was 10 feet they came in that instance. But so get to the point. He has, lots of bear experience. I learned a lot from him. Most of my bear, experience, over a decade ago came from him getting into the guiding career. And so he's definitely well experienced in that.
Yeah.
And
when you going into a hunt like this, do you guys talk about it before you leave? Is it just something that you guys just have a mutual understanding of what you're gonna do if you run into a problem bear or if you run into a situation like that?
Yeah, for instance, I always do my guide talk when I'm going with somebody, but going into this one, we really didn't have a talk. I mean, I just have so much respect for him, and he taught me everything, so I kind of really didn't, step up to the plate and kind of talk everything over. Just, he's the guy that taught me everything. So he actually didn't carry his 375 on this hunt, particularly because the wolf season was still open. So he was carrying his Weatherby 300, something that he regrets, obviously afterwards. So he was carrying a 180 grain bullet, but rather than a 300 grain bullet. And had a mixture of factory rounds and reloads in the gun. So if he had his 375, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure things would have been a little different in the situation that was presented.
Yeah, I think that tracks on all the bear attack stories we've covered on this show, and it certainly tracks with yours. There's just little idiosyncrasies, little decisions that lead up to the end result, whether it's positive or negative.
Yep, exactly. And
it's just these little things, and it's gotten me to think about, when I'm out in grizzly country, think about the little things, understand, these are this what thinks like a very small decision before I jump in my truck can mean life or death. Take us through what the day was like, right before it happened. You guys seeing a lot of bears? Give us just a brief description of the hunt prior to the attack.
Yeah, it was sunny. Conditions were good, not too favorable. They were a little bit warm, but it was still crusty in the morning. And everything was going good. We just knew we had to get on something, before noon and try to best get out of there before, the snow got too soft for riding. And, I'm the one who actually spotted it. I see kind of like a hole up there and a bunch of tracks, and I studied it pretty good from down below and noticed that, I was like, hey, there's no exit tracks. What I mean by that is nothing going over the mountain, nothing going away. All the tracks lead back into the hole. So I asked my dad, I said, I'm pretty sure there's a bear, up there, up on that mountain. I said, what do we do? You want to go? And he goes, oh, why don't we do it tomorrow? I go, no, there's no tomorrow. I said, well, I want to leave this afternoon. I said, we either do it now or we just get out of here. And he said, do you have a coin? Let's flip a coin. And I said, no, I don't have a coin. So we're going to go the other way. If whatever, either that or we're going to go look at the bear and see if what kind of bear it was. And I said, no, I don't have a coin. So he kind of looked back and forth, up the other valley that we're going to go check out or back up the mountain. He says, well, let's go. So that's kind of how that led into the whole deal there.
Yeah. So you guys get going up that direction. And when's the first time you knew there was trouble?
Well, I got up there and thought about getting a above it with the machines, but it looked pretty steep, and I couldn't tell on the crevice. And he was driving a little Tundra that's a single cylinder 300, so I didn't want to ride up and have him walk. So we both walked up, and I got to this little vantage point. It's kind of like a little knoll, like a little flattened top within the mountain. And I ranged find it, and it was 36 yards, and we were slightly down, pretty much level with it. So I felt pretty comfortable there. And I said, well, we got to go check these tracks out. I want to see what's in the hole. I want to get above it and check these tracks out. And he's like, no, I'm fine right here. And I go, okay. And I said, why don't you put a round in your chamber? That's like my number one pet peeve. My guide talk is rounds in the chamber. So I said, let's put a fourth round in. So you have 4 rounds, 3 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. And he tried putting 1 in the chamber. It was one of his reloads from years ago, and it would not chamber. And then I was like, oh. He goes, you're the last one to use this gun. I said, well, I was using your factory rounds. So he had 9 rounds on the side of the stock. So I grabbed a gun from him and put a factory round in it and chambered it. So later on, I did not know he had 3 reloads underneath that factory round. So hindsight's 2020. I would have took 4 factory rounds and put them in his gun, but that's here or there.
Yep.
So that's kind of how we got set up there.
Yep. So then you used to kind of struck off to check the tracks out?
Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm going to go up and around and check out the track. So something that I don't do. So this is one thing I regret. I said, okay, I'm going to put 1 in the chamber, and I'm just going to walk up in front. So we walk around. So I walked clear to the round, way to the side. I mean, it took me a little bit. And I got up there, and I was above it. I don't know how far. I would say 10 yards probably. And I'm facing actually to my back to me. My dad's at 11 o'clock. My back's facing away. And I was looking at the size of the track and realizing, wow, this looks like it's a big bear. Just starting to comprehend like what we got going on. And that's when he says he's coming out. Bret started yelling at me. So,
and you at this point, he starts yelling at you. Spin around and
yep,
see
I
the bear.
spin around. Yep, I spin around. You got to remember, my dad's 36 yards from the hole, slightly down, not much, pretty much level. I spin around, with 1 in the chamber, obviously, with my 375 and 3 in the magazine. And I'm sitting there, and it happens to, this bear comes, I'm in sticker shock of the size of it and how close I was to it. And very, very fortunate that I didn't get nailed from behind. He honed in on my dad's voice, obviously, as soon as he popped out, because my dad was screaming, Bret, he's coming out. And basically, when I saw it, my dad lays off a round, and I was all excited, thinking, okay, boom, he's going to hit him, and he's going to spin, and I'm going to plug him. And that bear just looked like he got spit on. So what happened was my dad had him on his head like he shot that bear in 07, and it went down in a dip. So his 180 grain bullet shot went over his head and hit him square in the back and missed the spine. Oof. So that thing looked like it got shot with a BB gun. Never even broke stride. So I'm sitting there trying to get up in a 3x9 scope. I have it on 3 power, obviously. And and then I'm sitting here, my natural reaction, I'm pretty quick on that gun I've been carrying around for 10 years. First thing I do is just natural. I jack around in, but what I do is the live rounds flying out that I'm jacking out. And my combination of my dad saying, Bret, he's going to get me after he already made his first shot. I couldn't even get him in the scope. In hindsight, it's 2020. It's kind of a blessing because I would have been shooting at, 45 yards ish, maybe even 50 in a 3. But, I could have shot him because he was at 11 o'clock, basically shooting straight at him. And my dad couldn't get his second round in. It got jammed up. That reload was his next round, that third round that was supposed to back up the first round of the factory that I put in his gun.
Yep.
And he couldn't get the shot off. And it was going straight at him. Happened so quick. We're talking a couple seconds what I just explained to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you, in those seconds, do you, when you replay that in your mind, does it seem slower? I'm always interested in those moments, those moments before and kind of how you recollect them so many years later?
Well, it's fast, but obviously 4 years later, it's pretty much in slow motion, but it's nothing, a lot of people probably can relate. They see a big animal, and if they had guns in their eyes, it would kill it. But it happened in a couple 2 seconds, there was nothing I could do about it. A couple days later, I kept, kicking myself in the butt. Why didn't I get a shot off? But, after those couple days went by, I'm grateful, I didn't get a shot off, because my shot would have been basically at impact.
Yeah.
And that's a 3x9 scope, and the bear was basically in between me and him, so it would have been a no good deal. So
yeah, is he at this point still on the snow machine?
No, snow machines were left down below. We had to walk up good ways. In my video, you can see at the very end of it how far down those snow machines are.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And so the bear makes impact with your dad. Where are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm pretty much stuck in my tracks. Just all I did was spin around 180 from when he yelled at me saying the bear was out. What do I do? Impact happened. It looked like a semi-truck hitting a fire hydrant. 1 second, my dad's on his knees there, knelt down, in shooting position, and then he's gone, and they're down the mountain. So basically the bear just hit him and basically just grabbed his, like a prey, behind the neck, but he just got him by the head and just took him down just like he was a rag doll. So what I do was, obviously, I didn't set my rifle down. That's a no-no. I was always taught by my dad to have your rifle in your hand and not on your backpack and in your hands. So I threw it to my left hand and started sprinting right off the bat within the first couple strides. I drew my 454 Casull. I had prior experience with that 2 years prior, so I had total confidence in that gun. And then I started sprinting. I actually didn't sprint. At first I started sprinting to the point of impact, but then I had to go off sound, so I started sprinting on an angle towards them.
And the sound you're hearing is just the bear at that point? Is your dad?
Yeah, the bear, my dad, just full on, it's hard to describe.
Yeah.
Full on brawl, like, with humans, just commotion is the way to describe it.
Yeah.
Not good sounding commotion, if I will add.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to figure out the right questions to ask. I know this is probably tough to recount. So if if you need to stop at any point and say I just don't want to describe that, that's totally okay, man.
Yep, will do.
As you get down in range for the Casull to do its job, what position are you in and what are you thinking at that point?
Okay, well, I'm in a full on sprint. And I had to go down the dip. And when I'm going down the dip, it's 11 o'clock. So borderline, snow conditions. And very fortunate, I never post-holed once. If I would have post-holed, it'd probably been a different result. So my tracks are just on top. Actually, I sunk a little bit, but never to break stride. Even the bear's tracks were on top. I'm sprinting down and I'm doing my thoughts and it's at that point my adrenaline was pumping, survival instinct kicked in, and it was a weird feeling. I harvested quite a bit of animals in my day so far, and that was a different feeling. So I just went straight up, and I didn't know what I was getting into, but I was just running towards the sound at that point.
And when you approach the attack, are you now behind? Are you behind the bear? Or are you, what position is the bear and your dad in when you
They're down at me, so I'm running straight at them. So I crest over, and I thought they were going to be closer. Everything I thought was going to be closer, but this is a matter of a couple seconds we're talking. But they're down there a ways, so I'm basically sprinting downhill at that point. Some of the guys that went out there the next day were describing my tracks as like an Olympic athlete, like how far my stride was, but I was just full on sprint. But go down there and he's on them. So and then they were way to my right. Not way to my right, but farther than I thought they were. So I just and then once I got him in sight, then I felt relief because then I just had a target to go straight after. So I was just going straight down into it. And 454 Casull, so double action, Ruger, Super Alaskan Red Hawk. And I pulled the hammer back because I know it's a light trigger, and I knew I was going to have to get close and things were going to happen fast. And I don't know how far, but I hold the gun straight out at me, and I was yelling. So, I mean, you basically have two objects going at it in a full brawl, and I was the third party, and I was making myself known as I approached them.
Yeah. Yeah, when you take aim with the Ruger, what's, because at that point, that's the critical moment, right? Like this is life or death. When you take aim and you're going to crack off a shot, it becomes critical for your dad and also critical for you, because if you don't stop that bear, he may turn and come for you as well. So what's going through your head at that critical moment? Like, how are you assessing where to aim and where to put that 454?
Yeah. Well, I like that word you used, aim. So that's what I first started to try to do. I held the gun out, and as I'm full on running to him, yelling, trying, the bear kind of sensed me, and slowly, he didn't back off, but he slid down his body from like his head area to like his chest area. And I think my dad was on his back. I'm not really sure. I just saw, it didn't even look like he had a head. It was just a red blob and blood. It was hard to describe how much blood there was at the scene. But, so I started aiming, and I was like, man, this is not good. So I just kept going full, I just wanted to get human out of my view. Like, basically, just only thing I see is bear. So I got there. I mean, at the time it didn't bother me, but later on thinking, wow, that was kind of not stupid, but pretty crazy how close I got to make my first shot. I get in there, and I got him in the side of the neck. So basically I had a broadside. They were both broadside to me. I was running straight at him, 90-degree angle. Shot him in the neck, actually retrieved that piece of lead. I got that bullet. And then the bear kind of backed off, and then I got him. He was down by his legs, and that's when I got him in the vitals. And I got that bullet. I didn't get the neck bullet. Yep. So basically it took 2 bullets of me to get him off, and basically tackled this bear off of him, but I was using lead as a buffer. And then the bear spun, and I went down. And now at the point, my dad's kind of behind me now. He's kind of at a 5 o'clock, and I didn't even worry about him at that point. I was just trying to kill the bear. And then that's when the bear turned on me and dug into the mountain. I'm coming down at him. We're basically playing chicken, going head on. He did one stride. I leaned back. I had my 375, and I remember thinking to myself, well, I'm going to have to resort to my rifle after, once I'm out. And then my third round, and I held it out. I did not hesitate, but at that moment I thought, okay, I did think this to myself. I said, okay, this is the last shot. Like this has to happen because my dad's life depends on it and my life depends on it. I was literally bracing for impact and made that third shot, and it hit him straight in the head.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's sometimes you just say wow, and that's enough. Did you ever remember, like literally going face to face with this bear, looking him in the eye or reading his demeanor? Did you, this is a big bear. How big did you say the bear was?
Oh, he was probably 8'3", 8'4". Yeah, we're in the process of getting a life size for my dad. So yeah,
I know you're.
It was a solid. It was a big bear. It was 8.5. I mean, it was a big bear.
Yeah.
Do you ever up close like that? It's close.
I think an important part of this, in the rewind is to, once you put a couple of rounds in this bear, and then you're facing off playing chicken as you described. So so amazingly described playing chicken with a giant boar such as this one.
Yep.
Do you remember, the way it looked?
Oh, yes, I do.
Its
very
expression.
Vivid. Yep, I can. Yeah, I wish I had a GoPro on my head, but I mean, I can visually. That's what I can see. Basically, is how to describe it.
Yeah,
I literally can see it in my mind. He dug down, and I was a little off-centered when I shot him in the head. It was to the right, but it was amazing because it just reared back up like I don't know, I want to say a puppy dog getting up, sitting down up on his, front legs started going up, and I plugged him right in the throat, right in the neck, center neck, that fourth round, and then he just kind of catapulted backwards, and I kept running towards him and was able to get a fifth round into him, probably mid butt or something, I don't even know, lower back. And the sixth round, I had so much adrenaline, so much emotion going on at that point. I tried aiming for that sixth shot, and he was so far out of range, I didn't even bother. Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, I remember it very well.
I imagine it's vivid. So at the point you get to the point where the bear is dead, or at least you're fairly certain.
I watched it die. That third round killed him right in front of me, 5.5 feet from claw mark to my boot track. And I watched him. Yep.
So, 5.5 feet. Good Lord.
Yeah, 5.5 feet. That's the closest. I can't. My dad has me beat. He came in contact with him.
True.
I never touched the bear.
Yeah. So at that point, I'm assuming that your mind switches to your dad at that point, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
And so what do you do?
Well, I once the bear was done, I released the hammer, and on that sixth round, I put it back in my holster and I turned around. And to be honest, I thought my dad was going to be about 10 feet behind me, but he was up the mountain probably 50 feet. That's how much adrenaline, and had no clue where I was on the side of the mountain. That's just things change. So I ran up to him, and to be honest with you, I thought I might get a couple seconds. If not, he's already dead, because he wasn't moving when I got up there. And then he just started moving around and started talking like normal. And I was in sticker shock. And then I jump into what North American Rescue kind of described in their post on Instagram, and started going into my medical assessment right away. And then we started talking about the situation.
Yeah, I think is a question I have. And like I said, feel free to go as much in depth as you want to here, or as comfortable. The question I have is as I listen to you describe this story, I mean, to me, I keep coming back to this sounds heroic. What you did sounds, even though a lot of it was instinctual, it sounds like a lot of people when tested may not have been as aggressive as you were, and may not have immediately gone into this assessment. Can you kind of walk that back and explain to people why you think you reacted in the way you did on both accounts?
Well, I know there was absolutely zero hesitation in what I did. I would probably, that would probably be because 2 years ago I had an instance with that gun, and obviously it's my dad. And I don't know, I can't really describe. I was in the moment, and I had the confidence, and I had one mission on my mind, was to get that bear and kill him. So get him off of him and kill him, because I should have did it, I wish I would. At that point, I kept thinking, I didn't get a shot off. It's, I know it's not my fault, but I mean, that's what I was thinking at the time. So I would, that's probably the reason why I did that. So just went straight after him. And it's my dad had no clue that I shot. Later on talking to him, I didn't even hear you shot. So I shot 5 times. I shot twice right over top of you, and shot him 3 more times. Killed him on the third round. Shot him 2 more times. Just keep putting lead in him. So
with your dad, when you're doing your assessment, as if folks have seen the video and the photos, it's gruesome. I mean, there's no way around it.
Yeah.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's some of the most gruesome footage that I've ever seen. Because you have your training, did you kind of mentally skip over that? And you had to. I know you did. But how are you kind of dealing with all the inputs at this? I'm sure what seemed like a pretty crazy time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was hyperventilating. If you listen in the video, and he's the one that's calming me down. And my first instance was keep him alive, and check him out. So once I realized, hey, he's going to be fine, then I started going into a mode like, I need to get you out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, hindsight's 20/20, but one thing I did not have, and which I carry nowadays, is an inReach. And I was at a cell phone service area at that point, and that's the one thing I wish I had. it would have saved 2.5 hours on time to cut his time off getting to the hospital.
Yeah, yeah. And inReach, I discovered that about 3 or 4 years ago that the inReach is essential out there. And
yes, for sure.
It's worth the monthly charge or whatever Garmin is charging, and it just is to stay in contact with your loved ones and for SOS situations like this one. So you've at the point that you've done the assessment, there's no bleeding, there's no significant bleeding from the injury. Was his airway compromised in any way? Like, was that a critical part of this for you?
No, actually, naturally, just coming up to him, he was fine. I mean, the only thing that compromised his airway was probably me trying to grab his face and slap it back on him because, it's like cut around. I didn't slap it back on him, but I put it back on him. That's the only way that he was choking, and it was not good. So that took about a minute to clear him up and realize, hey, we need to leave this face hang. So
gotcha. And then it said in the North American Rescue Post that the best course of action at the time was to let your father find a comfortable position for a 25-mile snow machine evacuation to a location where you could get a hold of emergency services. How quickly from you doing the assessment and kind of figuring out the situation were you guys on the snow machine and back for those 25 miles?
So we got an hour to deal with all you just mentioned. So impact was at 11.
Yep.
I actually took that picture that went viral 4 years ago at noon. So basically from impact was at 11, we started moving towards help at noon. So there's an hour in between. First, the 15 minutes was me assessing it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to run back down and grab my snow machine, which was a 550, and I knew I could make it up there. And I'm going to grab you. So I ran down the mountain, jumped on my machine. I high marked way above him, and I came down facing down at him, right next to him, and I could not stop. So I yelled at him saying, hey, I'm going to have to go back around. So then my second attempt, I went right next to him, and I stopped facing uphill, and I put the parking brake on.
Yep.
And then that's when I tried to do his tie his face. And then after that, he got cleared with choking. And then he's the one. He asked me, hey, take a picture of me. So that's how that all started.
Wow. I think that was a huge question for a lot of people that reached out to me, and I'm sure reached out to you, is questioning, sometimes in a fashion I thought was inappropriate, but questioning, why would you do that? Why would you take that video? Why would you? How could you? Why would you? So it's good to hear you say that, but can you kind of give a little more detail into what was going on then?
Yeah, for sure. No, to be honest with you, that picture was taken for two reasons. One, he asked me, so I took it. And right after I took that initial photo, I thought to myself, well, if he doesn't make it out of here, how would I explain this to my mom? So then I flipped it over to video on my iPhone, and I said, start talking. And he talked, and it's actually 56 seconds long, almost a minute. And he just kind of explained a little bit what happened, and that's how that went down. And I stopped record, and we got to get out of here, and I started getting him up because at that point he's been in the same position for almost 20 minutes. And I actually, in the process of trying to help get him to his feet, I step backwards, and I'm like, what the heck is that? I actually said that out loud. He goes, that's my ear. Obviously, he was looking at it prior, probably when I was going down to get the snow machine.
Oh, man.
So it was the top half of his right ear is what I stepped on. So.
Did you retrieve it?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I didn't know what. I just threw it in my Carhartt pocket, wrapped it up in a paper towel, like a half paper towel, and threw it in my Carhartt pocket. I wish I would have put it on snow, but later found out not much you can do with the ear 5.5 hours later. So
yeah. But a lot of new learnings here, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you get him on the snowmobile. Is he sitting in front of you, or is he hanging on from behind? Like, what's the position for the 25-mile ride?
Yeah, I put him on the snow machine. We're facing uphill, and he actually didn't even get on it, to honestly. He just kind of leaned against the seat, and he goes, nope, that's not going to work. I go, okay. So I said, let's walk down. I said, let's slide on your butt. And he goes, I ain't sliding. So I literally, this is what took so long. I walked him down kind of as a crutch. I think I was on the low side, so I kept him up the mountain. I basically was like a walking stick to him and walked him all the way back down to the other machine. And I had to run. Then I was like, hey, I got to go back up because there's no way I was going to take him out on the smaller machine. So I sprinted back up the mountain again and got the machine and slid it around and went straight down at him, and then got down there at him. So he actually didn't. I had to walk him off the mountain. We didn't snow machine off.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
during, when you guys are walking down, is he in audible or visible pain? Is he comfortable at that moment?
Seemed
That's
pretty
a dumb,
comfortable. Yeah,
that's a
he-
dumb
no, he-
question. I'm sorry, but
Yeah, no,
what level
yeah,
of comfort?
He's fine, but the only thing that he complained like a couple times, or I can tell, it was his wrist. I think it was his right wrist that was bent, and that's the one that got chopped really good. And he was complaining about that, obviously, because it was shattered and broken and whatnot. But nothing like that. I got him down there and made sure he's stable, got him some water, and then that's when I did my sprint back up, or jog or whatever. I don't even remember, but I was moving. Got the machine, got down there, and I started to get him on there, and I ripped off the gas can off the other one. It was topping off my machine because it's a 550. They suck gas. And trying to get him to go, and he was like, get all my stuff off of the other one. I was like, what? So I untied his backpack, his little sack, and getting all his belongings off the other machine, which I thought was kind of ridiculous. But he was thinking ahead in case we get stuck out there. And got him loaded up.
Yeah.
And in the backtrack a little bit, I left out before I loaded him on the snow machine, or actually before I started walking him down. He goes, I want to take pictures with the bear, is what he told me. So the whole time I'm trying to get him out of here, he's wanting pictures with the bear. So, yeah.
So that's where that now famous
that's where
photo came from.
Yes, and that famous photo. And it's not like I went out of my way.
Yeah.
The bear slid down the single machine, went right by the machine, probably hit it. I don't know, just came close to it and slid. And it was literally right in the way, right in our tracks on the way out. So I knew we were going to go by it. So I promised him at least a picture.
Yeah, that's strangely enough. I think that after people process the initial shock of what they're looking at, then they start to reasonably, and I think reasonably so, question how did this come to be? How did these pictures and videos come to be? So I think as part of the process of telling this story and getting it right, I think that's a huge part of it. And it's good to hear that that at that point your dad was cogent enough to kind of, and I think you seem like you were too. Neither of you seem particularly frantic at that moment.
No, not at all. No. Then we started going, and I had him on the back of the snow machine. So we pulled up to the bear, and we both looked at the bear. So he even said, well, that's a big bear. And I go, yeah. And then he started to get off the machine. I jumped off, and he started to get off. I said, no, stay on the machine. I already got you on there. And I literally jumped over its head, stepped over its neck, took like 2 or 3 photos. Everybody's seen the photo of it.
Yeah.
And then I took another detail. I think I posted all those pretty much. The first shot in the neck, you can see that, and the third shot in the head where it bled out. And then I stepped back on the machine, and he was behind me, and we started going down, descended down into the bottom of the valley, and he kept hitting me in the back, saying I was going too fast.
Wow.
And he told me to actually stop. We stopped down the bottom, and he said, turn the machine off. So we turned the machine off and had a little powwow talk. So,
Wow. It's nice to hear you still being fatherly in the midst of something like this. Did you, during that journey, did you ever have any, at this point he can see, obviously. He can hear you, as you explained. There's never any other point where you thought, maybe I didn't assess this right. It just sounds like you guys were pretty pragmatic.
Yeah, we're pretty good about it. He only had one basically hand, that was his left. So then he says, this ain't working. We got to figure something out. I said, slide forward. So I pushed him all the way forward. I jammed his feet underneath the little foot things in the front of the machine. And I had a little rubber high marker bar is what I call them. And I said, put your hand on this and hang on. I says, if you feel woozy or whatever, lift your hand up. So then I had 2 guns strapped on me. So I had my feet pretty much flat on the running boards behind his feet, but some of my heels were kind of sticking up on the end of the gun tips. And like I emphasize at all this, carry a sidearm. This is why he's still alive. This is why I'm still alive. But another thing was I had a Goldfinger left-handed throttle on that snow machine, which is connected to my other throttle on the right side. So I basically had dual throttles, which played a big factor of getting out of there.
Yeah.
Later for the rest of the 24 miles that we had to ride.
So you guys make it the 24 miles. How long did it take you to do that?
Left at noon. I got to help at 1:30. So it took me an hour and a half
Wow.
to do 25 miles. Yep.
And what are you, as you're doing that hour and a half journey, what are you assessing in terms of other factors? Like you already mentioned that. What if you get stuck out there? What if you run out of gas? What if?
That's what I'm. Yep, exactly. I'm thinking this all in my head. I'm going back out the way I came. I knew there was another way to get out, but I got a track. So I started going out. And I was basically bouncing them around like a little kid. So I had them in between my arms. I had control of them at that point and control of the machine. I was able to not go 15 miles an hour like he wanted me to, 10 miles an hour on the back. I was able to go 45, 50 at times. And just, basically sending it and just bouncing him around. I told him to lift his hand up. And, every now and then I would slow down and yell at him, hey, just to get him to kind of say something so he didn't fall asleep on me or anything. And like here's just kind of how crazy, but one thing that was going through my mind, he lost a hat on the way in. And just, a little goofy little winter hat. And it was about 10 feet off the trail. We're about 3/4 of the way out, and I see it. At this point, I think he's nodding off or just, he's just there for the ride. And then this is the one mistake I did. I kind of dipped the machine a little bit trying to get his hat. So I slowed down and got off the trail a little bit, and it dipped, and it was like on a 45-degree angle. And he was yelling at me, what are you doing? And I came to a point I was struggling trying to get that machine back over, and I came to a point, almost asked him to get off, but I was able to get him kind of flattened without him getting off, and I grabbed his hat, and I just kind of set it on top of his head and pulled it down real quick. I said, I got your hat.
Did he get a laugh out of that?
Kind of. He was kind of upset at the time, but I think he's glad that I got it later on.
That's
so,
good.
Yeah. Yep. And that time we're talking, the sun was getting soft, but I was able to keep going and, got him back there.
Well, when in an effort to kind of get to the point where we can explain, what you believe about what saved your life and your dad's life here and what you want people to know. When you get out there and you're able to, what's the first contact with emergency services and how did that go?
Yeah, we were able to get to where we were staying, and I come in and I bust through their door and says, somebody needs a call. My dad got attacked by a bear, and there was plenty of people there, so they were helping him out, and we were able to get a call out to the troopers and Life Med, and this was at 1:30, and I'm trying to think. I think he got to the hospital at 4:30, so they got there an hour and a half later. And took him to Matsu there in between Palmer and Wasilla. And he got to the hospital 5.5 hours later.
Do you remember, the people at the place you were staying, like their reaction at first seeing him? Was there a lot of panic and screaming and shock?
Yeah, no, every sticker shock. There was one gentleman, actually, he was in the photo of my dad the night before, which is actually the last close-up picture of my dad. He was pretty calm and was talking to him the whole time, before my Life Med got there. And even the medics, I think my dad all met with them afterwards in the last few years. They have all that training, but there's no training in the world that can prepare you for that, and I don't want to quote anybody or quote my dad, but, one of the medics kind of got up there and was like, oh, man. And my dad said, it's okay, son, I'm all right, or something like that. So, but, yeah, so he was talking to the medics the whole time, and they wanted him to take off his shirt, and my dad says, well, who's going to keep you guys alive if we crash somewhere, So he had a head on his shoulders and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's amazing. Talk about his recovery. the most amazing part of this, the thing that just is flabbergasting to me, is that through all this time, you guys were able to, take each problem and solve it and get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But at some point, it was out of your control and in the hands of medical professionals. And at that point, what did they have to do? And then I'm sure it was a long, long recovery, if I had to guess.
Yeah, they bandaged him pretty good, got him to the hospital. I think he went into surgery that night, and I got there like an hour after, and he was all, tubes and all that stuff. But he got in there, and he was able to get out, I think, 6 days after entering the hospital. I got him out of the hospital. So, very fortunate. And then he had his both arms cast up, and I think he got some pins in his both hands, his finger and his wrist. I think I posted those on the second post.
Yeah.
On my Instagram.
Yep, saw those.
And, yep, very fortunate. He has, he has one eye, but the other eye's still in there. It just says wrist is a little bent, He likes to say he can reach around corners and stuff now with that hand. So, yeah.
Sounds like he's got the right perspective, and that he had the right perspective throughout. How many surgeries on his face were there? And, just
to be honest with you, just the one initial one that night. He had a few, I don't know how many. He'd probably be telling that more when he starts sharing his story. But, I know he had a few eye surgeries, on his good eye, just cosmetic stuff. And then I know he had an ear surgery like a year and a half ago, maybe. So for like 3.5 years, he couldn't hear out of the bad ear because the ear canal wasn't lined up, and surgeons said that they need to wait or something for the scar tissue. So, he was kind of happy, out of surgery a few days later after that ear surgery. It was the first time he can hear himself pee out of that ear. So now he's happy he can hear out of both ears. So
your dad sounds like a guy I'd like a lot. He sounds like he's got the right sense of humor about the whole damn thing. When you look back on it all, and again, I'm glad after having so many people send me those photos and have so many people talking about this. That's just my life and my perspective. I can't imagine from your end. Being able to tell the story now and get these things out there that so many people just didn't care about or didn't care to try to learn. Is there anything else about the attack itself, your emotions, or anything you want people to know, something that you take away from this?
Well, take away from it, the main thing that I would tell people to take away from this is a sidearm. Basically, a gun or a handgun, doesn't have to be a handgun, but just anything that's attached to your body, firearm-wise, that you can access. In this instance, I know saved his life, and obviously probably saved mine because I was getting ready to get impacted. But that's the one thing I say, carry a sidearm. I was told a story back in 2012, kind of similar situation. The guy survived, but it was a secondhand story. But the guy, I asked, that was my question. I was like, I kind of, not laughed at him, but chuckled, said, why are you carrying that 44 Airlight, goat hunting? And then he explained that and opened up the whole new eyes. 6 months later, I got my handgun and Diamond D holster on my Ruger and started carrying it, and had an instance with a bear in the alders and dispatched it at 12 feet. And both my hunter and I, 2 years prior to my dad's attack, were very thankful I had that, thankful that I had that. And I was carrying it during my dad's attack. And that's the reason why, and he's still alive in this situation. Every situation is different, but this bear was killing him, and that's what stopped him, was that Ruger handgun.
Yeah. There's no better illustration of that idea. We do have a lot of discussions here about bear spray versus pistol. My philosophy has always been both. Why not both? Our company we work with a lot here, FHF, has a body mount. It goes on the bottom of your bino harness. So that's one option. But for you, I think I wonder if you would agree that you have to kind of be aware and familiar with your own setup, what holster you're using, what caliber, what bullet, where you're going to holster, how you're going to draw, and those things I'm sure that you did are the instinctual things that you didn't have to worry about fumbling around with when you were sprinting down, at probably a crazy speed even to yourself to go save your dad.
Yes, exactly. I'm still carrying the same ammunition, Buffalo bore, 360 grain hard cast, because I watched it firsthand. It works. I don't recommend any kind of caliber, but I think anything that close will help. Main thing is having that sidearm. It's not for hunting; it's for protection. And it's good to have that. I mean, what happens? The story I got told, the bear knocked the rifle out of his hand, and the guy said as he was playing dead and fumbling around with the bear, he says he could have shot it 20 times. So that's kind of what I went off of, and in fact, I carry that handgun on every single hunt. Every time I'm in the backcountry in the state of Alaska, it can be a sheep hunt or a goat hunt, I'm still carrying it. So, that's the main thing. And carry it. And a lot of people say that black bears. I carry it over when I'm on this island when I'm brown bear hunting, but I don't carry it on the black bear island. But black bears kill people, so every situation is different. But in this situation, I am thankful that I had a firearm or a handgun with me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I carry a Kimber K6 357 revolver.
Perfect.
And that'll
work.
And I'm an East Coast kid, as people know that listen to the show. I lived in Texas for a while, in Illinois for a while. I've never lived in a place with a bear population that I would consider dangerous. But as soon as I moved to Montana, I'm in the community too, in the community of hunters. This is just what you do. And so you don't have to be a hunter. You can be anybody that goes outside to listen to your advice and to understand. So I like that. Again, I really do. I will say, Bret, I appreciate the way that you approach this. When we first started, the way that you approached wanting to tell the story, you were very cautious about who you were going to tell it to and exactly what you wanted to say and the goals of telling the story. I told some guys here in the office that I really admired that and appreciated that. So I want to tell you that too, because I think it's, what you're trying to get out of this, I think is admirable, is just get that message out. You told me many times that that's what you wanted to talk about. You'll tell the story, but only if it ends in exactly what you just said. So I just want you to know I appreciate that, and I think hopefully everyone listening to this can take that from it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. No, I was just, hashtag save a life, carry a handgun. That's what I was saying in the post. Anybody who's in the backcountry should consider carrying a handgun.
Yep.
Or any kind of firearm at that matter.
Yeah, I mean, as this thing went viral, you were sending me some links. I wasn't aware that Joe Rogan had talked about this. A bunch of your high-profile Instagram accounts had posted it. Some of them without your permission. Many of them, they're right without your permission. And so this was out there in the ether, man. A lot of people were talking about this, and what they weren't talking about how to prevent it. And so hopefully we'll get just as many people to listen to this and hear your story. As amazing as it is, man, when I'm listening to that, I'm slack-jawed for most of the time as you describe, what is only, in my opinion, a pretty heroic act. I think any of us would want to do that to save anyone, let alone our father.
Yeah, anyone's life, for that matter. Yep.
Yeah, let alone our father. So I really do, like I said, I really do appreciate that part of it, and it's an amazing story. So thanks for sharing it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. What's your dad up to these days? It sounds like he's doing better than a lot of people would have expected, given the videos.
Yeah, he's doing better. He's adapting. Got that hearing out of that one ear in the last year, and he's just living his life. He's doing pretty good. Things are a little slower, and he's learning. Relearning. He went. Biggest thing was you go 77 years with one eye and having to adapt with two eyes and having to adapt to one eye. It's a big transition. So. He's working with what he got.
Yeah, so. He sounds like he's pretty good at that all the way through on this one. So I mean, it's great to hear. And if you want to see more of what are some pretty amazing adventures and of your own on a personal level, and then your guiding, you can hit Bret up at BBB Alaskan on Instagram. That's where most of your content lives. Is there anywhere else they can find you, Bret?
Yeah, BBB Alaska on Instagram, and BBB.com is my website. Big game guiding and trapping tours and snow machine, etc. Guide services in Alaska. So
Beautiful. You want to leave anybody with, your philosophies, things that might have changed after this attack? Is there anything, a lot of people have like poetic things they want to say after this. Is there something you got in your head?
Yeah, there's two things. That on all my hunts, but I want to emphasize on bear hunting. Number one, especially on a bear hunt, I trusted my dad, so I separated from him because he taught me everything. But one thing in personal hunting and guiding nowadays, I do not separate from anybody. I stay within 10 feet, 20 feet or whatever, no more than 20 feet. Because when you're not next to me, I can't protect you or they can't protect me properly. That's number one. And then number two is, especially bear hunting, I would recommend chambering all your rounds, making sure they chamber. Actually, a year after that, I was guiding a sheep hunt. Guy mentioned the word reload. At the time, I was, not really favorable to reloads, but I made the guy chamber them, and he had a box of 20, and we found out, and we shot the gun at the range and it didn't go off, and realized that 12 of the rounds didn't have powder in them. So basically, check all your loads. I shake loads now and chamber them when I'm hunting in Alaska, especially bear hunting. So,
all right. Well, that's
those two things I would like to add. So
that's good. Well, that's good to leave everybody with, Bret. We'll check back in with you. Hopefully, maybe once out we can get your dad on, or you check back in when you get that full mount of this bear back, and
yes, for sure.
In times when there isn't quarantine restrictions, I can maybe fly up and hang out with you and see what it's like up in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, for sure, Ben. That sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Bret. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
That's it. That's all. Another episode in the books. Thank you to the entire Bond family, Lorraine Phillips, Bret Bond, Bret Westcott, a bunch of other folks that talked to us around this story. It's been interesting to investigate it and learn about it. All of it started because I was interested in hearing the truth in a pretty wild, salacious, bloody, gruesome story out of Alaska. And so it's taken us on a couple of week long wild ride. Phil, what are you feeling? What are you feeling, buddy?
This guy has two just crazy wild stories that have happened in his life. Yes. They happened just a couple of years apart, which is I hope my life stays boring. I'll say that.
Good point, Phil. I'm gonna go home and have another piece of cake.
That's right.
It'll all be fine. But yeah, I mean, deep, sincere thanks to Bret for jumping on. I know, as we already talked about here in the show, this is a 2.5 hour breakdown of this story. We could have gone probably another 2 hours more. There's a lot here, a lot to uncover. As I was telling somebody earlier, it's kind of like quicksand. The more that you struggle to get to the top, the more that you sink in. But that's just goes to show you how compelling of a story that we've run into here. And so I'm glad to have brought it to you. As I said, what we have outlined here today, I think is the truth, as crazy as it sounds. I don't think we'll ever hear anything like it, Phil. Again, there's just so much going on. Yeah. So I don't know what we're going to do next week, but it ain't going to be this.
No, you better figure it out.
Well, we got a lot of interesting emails to catch up on next week. I have a pile of emails here. Eric Hall's back at it, commenting on whether hunting is selfless or selfish.
Love it.
We got lots of emails about exactly what happened during turkey season, White Claw, all kinds of stuff. People really love Shane Mahoney. So we'll get to that next week. Next week you're going to hear an interview with one of the first employees of Impossible Meats.
Hey.
Yeah, we're going to interview the guy out of Hong Kong. I believe he's somewhere over there. And we're going to talk about Impossible Meats, Phil. What they taste like, why they were created, what the future of them is, whether they want me to stop killing things or not. Who knows? All of that next week with one of the original employees of Impossible Meats. I'm hoping it's going to be a very robust conversation and not a debate, but we shall see. You never know. You never know.
Yes, you've proven that.
If anything, I've proven that. So again, thanks for everybody for listening to this. Check themeateater.com over the next 7 days. We're going to share with you the full story in written form. Thanks to Joe Ferranato and Sam Lungard for helping me out with that and being a part of this. We will see you next week. Say bye, Phil.
Bye.
Too long, 'cause I can't go a week without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Without doing wrong. Oh, without doing wrong. Drinking in heaven.
You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.